Sword of Coming Chapter 1183. Chapter 1183. The most crazy place in the eyes in Ichi Lane. There are promising children such as Yuan Jingding and Guaniran, who have made great achievements and glorified the lintel, and there are also people who can't wear official robes and can't get a shadow, and they just make money. Today, when Chao Gingxin was on his way home, he met such a who should not mention provoking the family's main beam and burn incense without tearing down the beam. The family can't say how disappointed he is. Anyway, Yikixiang and Chirjia, there are not a few such descendants of officials and generals, as long as they don't obstruct the eyes of their elders during the New Year's and festivals, don't come up to scold them, and if they suffer for a few days in the first month, they will be able to live happily for almost a whole year. The carriage stopped slowly, because the man heard the coachman's voice reminding him that Chao Shilang was not working in the yamen today. The man hurriedly stretched out his greasy fingers to lift the curtains of the car. He was the same age as Chao Qingqing. Dressed as a fox girl in luxurious clothes, she said that she wanted to visit the legendary Ichi Alley. How could ordinary carriages and horses dare to wander here? Even if there is no legal prohibition and no courage to visit this alley, men would bring. She has come to learn a lot. This kind of behavior has been tried and tested, and it is more effective than aphrodisiac. The man moved to the car window, stretched out his hand and held the curtain woven by Keiguo, and saw Chao Shilang walking alone with a purple gourd. How important is it in our Dali dynasty now? Ichi Lane is only crowded with traffic in the early morning and at dusk, and it is still very deserted at the moment. The man put his head out of the car window and seeing no one around, he shouted loudly and said with a smile, "Brother Chao, he went to my restaurant for a drink when he had time. He just bought a batch of wine from the mountains. In fact, the taste is not inferior to Changchun Xianjiu. Less famous." Chao Shilang, who was walking in the shade of the plane trees, stopped and turned his head to look. There was a pig's head hanging over the window. Chao Shilang turned sideways, and when the carriage slowly approached, he tapped the pig's head lightly with the wine gourd and said with a smile, "Fatty Wei, this is Gwinning with my brother-in-law and finally willing to go home?" The fat man surnamed Wei looked so sullen that he was not married yet. He really didn't brag with the woman and didn't make drafts, and he really played with Chao Gingxin until the big and the small, and the relationship was very strong. When Chao Gingxin was a teenager, he sold those unscrupulous things. It was this guy who was busy, and now he is the only good person who drinks and keeps accounts and never collects debts. And the man has a purpose. No matter what official Chao Gingxin is, he never asks him to do things. When they meet, they just ask for a drink. When they meet for a drink, they only talk about youthful and embarrassing things. Chao Gung's eyes were full of smiles and he didn't mean to move. He stood on the side of the road and chatted with the fat man, as if he was in a trance. The chubby boy in the past has become an adult with a beard. The only difference is that I gained a few more laps. Probably because of the lack of earning money, and the fact that the elders of the family have not been very prosperous in the officialdom these years, and they have gone downhill a bit. For many years, there has been no one who is qualified to attend the Xiao Chao meeting. Fatty just opened a restaurant in Changpu River. Compared with ordinary people, it is of course a daily gold, but in Ichi Lane, which is full of high gates, it is not even a so-called high or low. Among the disciples, they are all not in the stream. Some juniors, as long as they are willing to run the business in the south of Dadu, they have owned one or two Xinjia ferry boats on the mountain a few years ago. At this moment, several carriages passed by, obviously seeing the figure of Chao Shilang, and they stopped one after another. A young man covered in extravagance lifted the curtain and greeted Chao Shilang with a smile on his face. So the young man called the gentleman Uncle Chao, who was close to him. Chao Gingxin didn't bother to glance sideways, turned a deaf ear, just continued chatting with Fatty, and just left the junior Ichi Lane who had done a lot of business there. After taking such a big face with a group of friends, the young man didn't dare to put his displeasure on his face, and he didn't even leave silently. Fatty reminded in a low voice, "Big brother Chao, don't make yourself difficult to be a person." Chao Shilang squinted at the convoy, just raised his chin, motioned to get out of the way and cool down. There were several rich and noble young people in that family who served as officials of the frontier in the Dali area. They didn't dare to fart at all and hid in the carriage angrily, not even feeling ashamed. The children of Ichi Lane are also divided into 3, 6, 9 and 3. If Chao Gingxin cocked Erlang's legs, it's not because he didn't have a tutor, or because his family didn't see him outside, and when they visited each other for New Year's greetings and drinks, this was because Chao Gingxin deliberately performed the ceremony of the younger generation and did not want to sit on the throne. Fatty smiled and said, "Why don't you give face so much? It's embarrassing to teach others like me to pick their feet." Chao Gingxin put the wine gourd on his waist and smiled. "These little bastards with too stinky money in their pockets, put their tails up to the sky. The restaurant business is so big, they don't even know how to invite Uncle Chow for a drink. It's okay to have a drink. I don't know because I almost ordered a baby kiss with his aunt, and I settled the wine debt. I just saw it on the road and called out to Uncle Chow. It's worth a few wine dollars. Is there such a good thing? The fat man asked suspiciously. Brother Chow, didn't you just pay off your wine debt today? Chow Gingxin thought he had heard it wrong. What? Fatty explained. It turned out that all the liquor debts Chow Gingxin owed on the Changpu River, including his restaurant, were settled by a foreigner who called himself Hao Chen. Chow Gingxin's expression did not change. He thought about it for a while and said with a smile, "You probably want to be close to the official hat of the servant. It doesn't matter, just assume that there is no such thing." The fat man is skeptical. Who has the guts to be so fat? Is it true that Dallas picket officials eat dry rice? The worst thing is calligraphy, painting, antiques, etc., and elegant bribes do not understand? If there is such a big battle, can Changpu restaurant be a place to hide? The problem is that it's not good to go to the temple with a pig's head. Who doesn't know that our Chao Shilang is notorious for drinking and accepting gifts and doing nothing? The table is good and it is difficult outside the table. Chow Gingxin waved his hand and said, "Don't delay your viewing of the scenery. If you really encounter something in the future, go to Han Luer. He can help talk on the ground near the Changpu River. His 6th-rank official can be a 3rd-rank. Beijing officials are all brothers who have played together until the end of the year. If you know the basics, don't be too thin and tell you something that doesn't make sense. When you encounter difficulties, you treat your brother as a brother too much, and you don't treat your brother as a brother. Let's just say that last year it was about the size of a sesame and mung bean. I heard that someone was so wrong that he closed the door to drink stuffy wine, and his face was full of snot and tears. Who do you want to answer? When you finally make trouble at home, Uncle Weber will think that you are not clear. All the new friendships in the world come from troublesome others, and then run away to find opportunities to help people solve troubles. I don't even know what are you afraid of. If you are so afraid of bothering others like you are, don't make money like this in a restaurant if you have the ability." The fat man said dully, "My father never told me this." Chow Gung smiled angrily. "The brain grows on my neck so I can use it more." Fatty nodded. "Understood, I'll definitely think more about it in the future." Chow Gingxin said with a smile, "Go home more when you have time, have a drink with your father and talk to your heart, and if it's a big deal, just admit to Uncle Weber that you're useless. Anyway, it's your own son. And you are really filial compared to that. The filial and unfilial neighbors among the neighbors are not much better than them. Also, remember to get married and get married quickly. Don't worry about anything, just let Uncle Weber hold his grandchildren, then you will see him on your side. There are no smiley face?" The fat man hummed. Chow Gung said solemnly, "Finally, I have to remind you." The fat man said, "Brother Chow, tell me, I'm listening." Chow Gingxin said with a wicked smile, "Wuichi Lane is famous for its smooth roads, so don't make your carriage bumpy all the way. Uncle Weber made a big joke when he was young." The fat man suddenly widened his eyes. "My father? After all, in my impression he was the father of the Minister of Rights for many years. He was a gentleman who had read the books of sages and sages, and he was so rigid and pedantic." Chow Gingxin said, "Don't say it was me." Fatty lowered the curtains and was so short by Chow Shilang, as if he was not so afraid of his father all of a sudden. Even Chow Gingxin was no exception. All of them were beaten up by their fathers. The only difference was whether to pull out a jade belt, or use a scabbard, a whip or a ruler. It's okay to cause trouble outside, especially the fights between peers. The elders almost don't care about it. It doesn't matter if the nose is blue and the face is swollen, but there are two things that will definitely be beaten. One is relying on family background and not studying well. Dare to contradict Mr. Jiashu. This kind of situation is mostly on the side of Cheer Street, where the door is full and bullying girls of the same age. A violent beating will definitely be enough. No matter how busy the officials in the two streets are, this group of generals and ministers dressed in yellow and purple must be served by family law when they return home. Chow Gingxin walked to the house alone, as if asking himself, talking to himself, with his inner voice. "Mr. Ma, has Qin Pingan already guessed the truth? At that time he deliberately didn't say anything in the small courtyard? Because of selling your senior brother's face? Didn't you care about me?" An old master who has served as a staff member of Chao Duzhou for many years in Huaihuan County replied indifferently, "He has a delicate mind. The small courtyard was testing you everywhere. He must have guessed it, otherwise he will not help you settle the sake bill. I have acquiesced in your pursuit of wealth and wealth at risk. As for me, I am just a shadowy ghost. What kind of senior brother can I be, and what kind of face is there to speak of?" Chow Gingxin rubbed his brows and felt a headache. He cautiously asked if there would be irreparable sequelae. Is it because I was greedy and lost a lot? The old master who disappeared without a trace sneered, this is the end of the matter, and the boat is done, so what's the point of regretting again? Chao Gingxin began to cheat. Mr. Ma, the earth-branched jade card was a clue you gave me at the beginning. According to the historical background, you are Qin Pinggan's uncle, and it was really settled by the Autumn Queen. You have to help me. What? The old master surnamed Ma remained silent. He didn't recognize the little junior brother. Just like what Chao Gingxin said to Zhou Haijing in the small courtyard, all wine is fake, let alone words. It's a big gamble. Because there was no such letter at all, the national teacher Cui Yu did not instruct Chao Gingxin to do anything, and naturally he did not instruct Chao Gingxin to take charge of the Dali branch. As for the earth-branched jade plaque in the yard that had been abandoned for many years, it was indeed an important clue that the Yin spirit beside him leaked to Chao Gingxin. Deliberately, he came from the school inspection of the secret library of the Ministry of Punishment. And this aide, surnamed Ma Mingzhan, was a teacher of Xianxia Academy before Dali moved. He was the junior brother of the mountain chief Qi Jingchun and rushed to Aquarius with Mao Xiaodong. Ma Zhan was also a disciple of Wenxing, but it is not the kind of disciple who has been passed down by himself, and his cultural identity is similar to Mao Xiaodong, who is currently serving as the secretary of the Rites Academy. But with Mao Xiaodong's situation, the difference is one thought, the difference between clouds and mud. One is already a scholar who can participate in the discussions of the Confucian Temple in China again and again. The key is to be able to meet frequently with the gentleman who restored the Confucian Temple's divine position, but the other has become a ghost who is only a ghost after his death. When it comes to Wenxing's lineage, the younger generation probably doesn't know that Wenxing had a disciple, Ma Zhan. The old Xiuzai once came to the capital and Chunshan Academy, and settled down in the Loud House. From the beginning to the end, Ma Zhan did not show up, and the most respected gentleman in his life did not look for him. He may have long known that there is still a ghost Ma Zhan in the capital of Dali, but the husband may not know it, or he may know but pretend not to know. Ma Zhan still has a hidden identity now, and is one of the temple blessings in the temple of the emperors and emperors of the past dynasties in the capital of Dali. In the capital, the only person who can talk is the treasurer Yang, who is currently serving as the of night tours in the temple of the city god. This is naturally an escape route arranged by the old man in the backyard of the pharmacy. He has become of mountains and rivers, and can continue to protect the family incense. In a pharmacy handed down from generation to generation by their ancestors of the Yang family, the old man in the backyard, although his name was Yang, was regarded as the elder of the Yang clan by the townspeople, but he had nothing to do with the Yang clan in Taoya Lane. Ma Zhan finally said that Cui Yu deliberately kept me, who was not a ghost or a ghost, by your side to help you manage a Longquan kiln supervisor. Cui Yu must have been waiting for such a day. Qin Pinggan is very smart, of course you can guess, so as long as you can make good use of the branch in the future, Qin Pinggan is willing to pretend that the letter really existed. Chao Gingxin asked curiously, Master Cui did it on purpose for you to end up in such a land. After so many years, you don't remember or hate him at all. Ma Zhan said indifferently, it's up to you to take the blame, you can't blame him. In his honor and disgrace, there was a saying that hurt people more deeply than spears and halberds. In fact, some silence is more hurtful. Of course, Ma Zhan doesn't think that his husband can't see him and there is any problem. The phrase, blame oneself, is Ma Zhan's best conclusion about himself. Ma Zhan doesn't even want to see Qin Pinggan, let alone talk about his husband? But deep in his heart, Ma Zhan hoped that his husband would still remember him, but he didn't dare to meet him. Chao Gingxin said with emotion, if you can't do it, you should ask yourself instead. This is from the famous saying of Yaxing. Therefore Ma Zhan said a few words of Wenxing's teachings. Sir has a saying, follow the Tao and not the king, and the etiquette should be based on the people's heart. Those who know themselves do not blame others, and those who know their destiny do not blame heaven. Honestly, nothing else matters. How brilliant Chao Gingxin is, of course I can hear it. The old master Ma Zhan, who has been living in guilt for so many years, every sentence means something. The sentence is his only pursuit now, and as for the last sentence, of course, it refers to the close disciple of Wenxing's lineage, Qin Pinggan. For this little junior brother, from the previous dialogue between Ma Zhan and Chao Gingxin, it can be seen that the old master's approval and appreciation are beyond words. Chao Gingxin smiled and said, arrived at the door of the house, how many drinks can I go in? Ma Zhan shook his head, I'm such an invisible ghost, it's enough to be a temple congratulation to the gate, and it's not appropriate to set foot in your wise family. Chao Gingxin no longer retains the old master who is strict in everything and everything. Ma Jian suddenly asked. Chao Gingxin, with your identity and intelligence, why are you so eager to seek success? Chao Gung shook his sleeves in his heart, raised his arms and pretended to hold a cup to drink. If you are not satisfied with 100 in life, you must use the cup in your hand. Ma Jian was silent for a moment, then shook his head. You are a Qi practitioner, and you say that you are not satisfied with your life. Chao Gingxin patted the wine gourd on his waist and said with a smile, what immortal, just a drunkard. The duty lies. Ma Jian bid farewell to Chao Gingxin, and immediately returned to the Emperor Temple. The other temple Zhu delivered a letter, saying that it was sent by a Beijing official named Sun Chu, and gave it to Ma Jian by name and surname. This secret letter, which is hard to say whether it is an invitation or a letter from the family, is set up with a layer of unskilled restrictions on landscapes. Opening the envelope, the letter contained only 3 sentences. The master has said that life and death are good, and humanity is complete. I sincerely invite my brothers to go to Luopao Mountain to meet Mr. It was not appropriate to reminisce in the capital of Dali before, and my husband misses brother Ma very much. Ma Jian put the letter back into the envelope, and sat in the lonely and desolate gatehouse. Back then, when the old scholar came to the capital, he appeared on the other side of the building, and on the other side of the alley, the old scholar often twisted his beard as if waiting for someone. Later, when Xing went to Chunshan Academy, which was equivalent to revealing his identity in the Delhi officialdom. After that, the old Xiaotsai stopped going to the alley. When the closed disciple raised a word, the old scholar who was so talkative on Qin Pinggan's side rarely jumped his feet and became anxious, swearing, saying that this Ma Jian was in a proper manner, knowing that the gentleman had already arrived in the capital, and it was only a few steps away. Do you know that there is such a respect for teachers and respect for teachers who are students in the world? Is it possible that I, the gentleman, want to find him? See you ass. That is, Qin Pinggan. If you change it to left and right or Mao Xiaodong, it is estimated that he will be going to help his husband swear. Qin Pinggan continued to persuade the husband, saying why he was angry with senior brother Ma, and took out the temperament and mind of the husband. The old Xiaotsai seemed to be really angry. He only said that he didn't see it, but he refused to see it. No one could intercede for Ma Jian. It's ridiculous. He used to be a good student, although he was just like Xiaodong. But the victory lies in respecting the teacher and respecting the way. Back then it was impossible for Mao Xiaodong to move the chair. Now this kid Ma Jian is a high-ranking official, and he has a bigger frame than the sky, so he doesn't recognize his husband. Qin Pinggan will force him to take him with him. Going to the Emperor Temple in the capital of Dali, even if the old scholar was dragged by the arm of the most doted disciple, he still stood like a loose pine. Don't go, let alone leave the alley. As long as I go out of the courtyard today, I can't give Ma Jian be a student. At that time Qin Pinggan had no choice but to give up. Speaking of his so-called closed-door disciple, it turns out that he can't say anything on the side of the master, and he should be normal. The old Xiaotsai had to go back and comfort the closed disciple, saying that it is not the same thing at all, but you can't feel that way. Why are you angry with Mr. Ma? And sure enough, we all have to blame Ma Jian. Look, it's right that Mr. doesn't see him. Finally, the old Xiaotsai sighed and explained to Qin Pinggan, saying that Ma Jian needed to take care of himself. Qin Pinggan smiled and said that he had guessed it, and the students were concerned about Mr. Fallen Mountain. As soon as Lu Shilu and Bai arrived, they added a few more white-haired boys to the chronology. They had nothing to do and ran to the top of the mountain alone, wrinkled and gloomy. That's Bai Yi, who is a big living person. After finally meeting each other, he didn't chat for a day or two, which was really embarrassing. At that time, in the Suishu Palace of the Qingming world, the palace owner Wu Shuangjiang was more in love with Su Zi's poems, and his Taoist companion, the female cultivator with the Taoist name, Natural, had average cultivation qualifications, but she was worthy of praise. A poem called Obsessed with Bai Yi. For her hobby, she collected more Bai Yi's latest poems in her hometown, Wu Shuangjiang, who never asked for help, and Zuandugwan Huayang Palace and the Poetic Paradise owed a lot of favors. Of course it's all paid back. As for whether this kind of transaction is worthwhile, Wu Shuangjiang has the final say. As for why he prefers Su Zi, Wu Shuangjiang said that Su Zi is happy in the midst of suffering, so he is open-minded. On the other hand, Bai is too smooth, it belongs to the extreme of happiness and sadness, but Bai is indeed unparalleled in talent, especially in the fact that he has enough fairy energy and is mighty. Today I finally saw Bai Yi, who was outside the book, but she felt embarrassed. Her current skin is indeed a bit shabby. The white-haired boy sat on the white jade railing on the top of Jilin Peak, sighing and worrying. If only I had the face of the ancestor of the hidden official, I guess I have been drinking with Mr. Bai Yi by now. Julien took a walk so far with a stooped figure, with his hands behind his back, and his feet on a pair of cloth shoes with fine needles and threads. It was Xuanhu who asked the millet grains to be distributed to everyone, and they all had a share. The white-haired boy turned his back to the old cook and waved his hand as a greeting. Julien approached the railing, looked at a landscape painting with layers of landscape from thick ink to light brush and asked, "Editor, do you have something on your mind?" The white-haired boy sighed, "It's fortunate that the ancestor of the hidden official was not there, otherwise I would be embarrassed. The relationship between men and women, there is a house in the house and there is a building upstairs. The people in the bureau can't tell the truth. If you commit a capital crime, it is the most difficult to prove your innocence." Julien smiled and said, "Love is a willful, naughty child. When he grew up, he changed his name to Responsibility, and his alias was Tacit Understanding." The white-haired boy grinned and said, "Old cook, I finally lost sight of it. My dialogue with Bai is just pure worship. How can it involve male and female love?" Julien smiled and said, "I didn't say that you like Bai Yi, you just admire it. It's a good thing for people who are self-proclaimed talents who don't worship Bai. Like me, you have to prepare a draft beforehand before you have the courage to get together. Bai Yi, go ahead." Julien knew very well that she didn't talk to Bai more, and she was worried that Bai Yi, who came from the Xuandu temple of Qingming, would attract the attention of two high-level people, which would also involve Wu Shuangjiang. The white-haired boy has now adopted a pseudonym for himself, Kongho. He clearly wanted the two bamboos to cuddle with each other, but in his heart he regretted teaching his husband and son-in-law to find a marquee. The white-haired boy shook his legs. "I am so liked by a person, and the person I like doesn't seem to know how to like each other. In short, spoiled. I am accustomed to asking people for something but I don't know how to pay." She asked, "Is this the truth? It took me many years to figure it out." Julien smiled and said, "Yes or not?" The white-haired boy wondered, "How?" Julien leaned over the railing. "There are some truths. Actually, it's not that you don't understand. It's just that you have to say it from an outsider like me." The white-haired boy laughed at himself. "Ha, is it a foreign monk who likes to recite sutras?" Julien shook his head and said slowly, "I used to travel around the rivers and lakes by myself in my hometown aimlessly. One time on the way to the mountain, I met an old monk who came down the mountain in white clothes and held a green piano. There are thousands of mountains and rivers in the world. Since we met, it must be the predestined law, so we stopped each other and talked a little about the Buddha Dharma. The result was a good match. We talked from the setting sun to the sun sinking into the mountains. Finally, I felt inspired and said that the old monk recited the scriptures. It is a derogatory word in the market, but it may be in Buddhism, but it is actually a very high state. He said that I have both Buddhism and wisdom roots." Just listening to the old cook talk about his old stories, the white-haired boy felt a lot more peaceful. The white-haired boy asked, "Mr. Zhu, in your hometown there were so many women who liked you. Didn't you ever fall in love with anyone? Is it because they paid you wrong all the time?" Julien smiled and said, "Of course I was tempted, but it has nothing to do with a woman's appearance or family background. The temptation to become a husband and wife and grow old together seems to have never happened. Rich women are arrogant, and xianxia has to wear gold and silver. After all, it is not very pleasing, but some of the pictures are really beautiful." The group of girls ran to the eaves to hide from the rain. Only one woman, xianxia cloth skirt, stood a little far away. Slender fingers with slightly calluses gently stroked the hair on the temples, and she was virtuous. It's very touching. The young man always pursues the allure of the country and the city, and an old man like me just wants a glimpse of it to be pleasing to the eye. The white-haired boy gave a thumbs up. "Mr. Zhu, to tell the truth, when it comes to the knowledge of love between men and women, you are not inferior to the hidden official ancestor." Julien smiled and shook his head. "How can this be compared? The gap between me and the young master is a lot worse than you and Qinlingjun." The white-haired boy laughed. "If you were talking about slapping horses, the old cook would be the second. As for the first, it has now become a foregone conclusion, it must be the old Jia." Seeing that she didn't believe it, Julien pointed to the distant landscape. "The same picture, did the ordinary master see it, or did the cultivator see it and think it looks good?" The white-haired boy said, "Of course, it's even more beautiful after seeing it with the naked eye." Julien nodded. "That's why the love of a young man is like splashing ink and it pours out on the paper in a flash. The details are clear, rigorous as meticulous painting, and the words and deeds are meticulous. Dare to ask where is the magic?" The white-haired boy thought about it and couldn't help but exclaimed, "It's chewy." After Julien put his hands together, he smiled and said, In my opinion, the real love between men and women is that a dumb person eats huanglian, and others can't stop it, and it's not enough if you don't eat it. The white-haired boy nodded and slapped his fist. Take it down and take it down, you must learn from Nailan Yu and take notes. Julien smiled and dismissed it. The white-haired boy said in a heartfelt voice, the same person came out of the picture scroll. It seems that only Mr. Zhu who has changed several names on the side of the hidden official ancestor. Julien addressed Qin Pingan, who used to be the master, the young master and the son. After all, women are more attentive. Julien smiled and said, it's not a name, how can I call it smoothly? The white-haired boy didn't bother to care about this and said, someone said that the real beauty in the world, when a woman sees it, she is not ashamed but only feels pity for me. Old cook, is that really true? Julien thought for a while, I'm blind and I can't remember a woman's face. The white-haired boy smiled and said, old cook, you are so cheap, you don't practice swords so much. If Chief Zhou and Xiaomo had an invisible battle for the Great Road, then the white-haired boy and the old cook, one was the #1 confidant of the hidden official ancestor, and the other was the big butler of Luapa Mountain, and they were actually rivals. Julien laughed and said, when I was young I really practiced swordsmanship for a few years. It's hard to say whether it is a killing skill. Anyway, everyone in the world says I play swords and it looks good. In the study room of Li Bao, Minister of Rights of Qinghuan State, Li Baozhen quickly stabilized his mind and spread his hands. What have I done? It seems that there is nothing. Lu Min's request to die has nothing to do with me. Mr. Qin also has to thank me for helping me catch this fish. Lu Min, who grew up with him, is still very dangerous. Not asking for anything means that there is no clue to follow. Pure malice means that Lu Min's Taoism is pure. The later he speaks, the bitten the more it hurts. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Li Jizao, you are called a thief with a guilty conscience. Li Baozhen bent his fingers, tapped the chair handle lightly and asked, your means of isolating heaven and earth is a magical power? Li Baozhen can still understand a little bit if he doesn't use his inner voice, but what if it's his own thoughts? In the dark, Li Baozhen was extremely sure of his thoughts, and they were all blocked by Qin Pingan. The first time he saw Qin Pingan, Li Baozhen was indeed a little flustered, and he subconsciously wanted to move the rescuers, of course his elder brother Li Shixing. To this day, Li Baozhen is still not sure about the big brother's roots. He only knows one thing. No matter who he encounters, what he encounters, or what difficulties he encounters, as long as Li Shixing comes forward, it will be fine. This mentality is exactly the same as that of Beidasheng Lu Qiqing. It doesn't matter if you have something to do, there are senior brothers there anyway. Qin Pingan ignored Li Baozhen, walked to the table, looked at the two bowls, nodded and smiled. Very impressive. If Gu can seize it, she will probably consider Li Jiji as a confidant. Li Baozhen's face changed slightly. Xiaomohui held the green bamboo stick, leaned back against the door, smiled and looked at the same age as his son. According to the sage language, a gentleman can be deceived, and there is an old saying in the market that has a similar meaning, it is better to provoke a gentleman than a villain. Qin Pingan turned around and leaned against the table with his arms wrapped around his sleeves and looked at Lu Min. What do you think, you were told by Li Baozhen and you just have pure malice towards me? Lu Min said, Li Baozhen will definitely kill me, then I must save myself. This is the last question my master gave me. Qin Pingan asked, after solving the problem, what about after the difficulties? Mr. Lu has plans for you? My master has no plans. Lu Min shook her head and said, I will join Mr. Chen's Luopao Mountain and be a completely non-existent person with no deadline. Qin Pingan was dumbfounded for a while. How could he be so rude? Lu Min said, if the realm is high, everything can come true and the world is not this world. What the patriarchs of the 3 religions want to do in the 14th realm? Why should there be a Zhongtu Confucian temple in Haoran? And why should Qingming have a Baiyu Jing? When I went to Luapa Mountain, of course Mr. Chen could not use Lu Min, and I would definitely not superfluous in anything, but Luopa Mountain must have a presence similar to Lu Min just in case. If Luopa Mountain never created the next sect, Chui the gentleman never left Luopao Mountain and went to Tongye continent to spread branches and leaves, and Luopao Mountain has me or not, it really makes no difference. Qin Pingan was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, it sounds very reasonable, there are benefits without harm, but I don't agree. Lu Min said, then I will wait patiently, choose to concentrate on cultivation in Huaihuang County, and wait for the day when Mr. Qin thinks I am useful. Once it is useful, it will be of great use. Qin Pingan asked, then I'm even more curious, what do you want? Lu Min pointed at Qin Pingan's cloth shoes. Qin Pingan turned his head and asked with a smile, Li Jizao, Can you guess the answer? Li Baozhen shook his head. This Lu Min is probably insane, how can I guess? However, he found that Qin Pingan at the moment seemed to have changed a person. To be precise, he had finally changed back to a person. This made Li Baozhen's heartstrings tense to the point that they were about to break. It's like a trivial ant, but because it is stepping on the back of Mr. Chen's shoe, the ant can take advantage of the opportunity to see the scenery farther and higher. Lu Min's eyes were hot and she said solemnly, I believe that one day, as long as you follow in Mr. Chen's footsteps, you can accomplish a feat that I can't imagine now. But at a certain moment in the future that can be called a big joint, there must be a place for me, Lu Min, between heaven and earth. It may be that I have done something, said a certain sentence in the mighty torrent of history. Among them, Lu Min can prove that she has been to the world once, and changed the direction of the river to a certain extent. Xiao Mo thought it was very interesting, and after listening to Jun's words, it was a worthwhile trip, so he said in his heart, Young master, it is Lu Min's sincerity without a doubt. Qin Pingan turned around again, bowed his head and bent down, staring at the two bowls on the table, one bowl of white water and one bowl of ink, stretched out his finger to dip a drop of ink, moved his finger, the drop of ink on the belly of the finger, on the surface of the white bowl. Before he could fall, he turned his back to Li Baozhen and Lu Min, his voice was smiling, You too, guess what each of you wants for each other's life and death? You can just give the answer in your heart. Anyway, Xiao Mo can hear it, there are only 4 answers and it is not difficult to guess. It is nothing more than Li Baozhen giving birth to Lu Minxing, Li Baozhen dead and Lu Minxing alive, Li Baozhen and Lu Mining all dead, Li Baozhen and Lu Mining all alive. If the two sides have different answers, but Li Jizao guessed if you can live, Lu Min will die. On the other hand, if Li Jizao dies, Lu Min will live. But if there is such a coincidence, your choice is the same and both will die. Li Baozhen said with a sneer, playing with things is frustrating, let alone manipulating people's hearts. Besides, in the great Li Mingguan, you kill me if you say it? Who do you think you are? Qin Pingan just stared at the ink on his fingertips that was about to fall into the white bowl, then changed to an easier guess. You two must be proficient in arithmetic. I believe the difficulty will be very small, assuming these 4 possibilities sex, you can guess any one of them, it can be the correct answer, both parties can survive, so what do you think the probability of surviving? 0, 1/4, 1/2, 1? To be fair, correct the answer must be among the 4 options. Why don't you guess the possibility? Whoever guesses right can leave this study alive immediately. Li Jizhuo will continue to serve as your master minister and behind-the-scenes monarch. Lu Min, you can even join Luapa Mountain immediately. Of course, there is another option, which is to not join Luapa Mountain for the time being, in exchange for the death of Li Bao, a minister of the Xuanhuan kingdom, who died without a problem. You can guess first come, first served. Lu Min actually closed her eyes and looked like she was waiting to die. Li Baozhen was still thinking about it over there, guessing the so-called correct answer. There was a knock on the door and Li Shixing smiled and said, Baozhen, don't guess. The question that Mr. Qin asked is wrong, so naturally there is no so-called correct answer. It is true that Li Baozhen can pass it on to his eldest brother without any words or thoughts, but he can't stop Li Shixing from being able to fortune-telling. Qin Pingan sighed and his eyes signaled that Xiao Mo didn't need to stop him. Li Shixing opened the door and saw Qin Pingan, with golden eyes and a little guy lying in his bun. It was just a cover-up method, and neither Li Baozhen nor Lu Min could see the little lotus man who followed Qin Pingan away from Luopao Mountain. A false alarm. Qin Pingan smiled and said, In the future, please take care of Mr. Li Jizao. There is no reason to be a thief for 1,000 days to prevent a thief for 1,000 days. Li Shixing smiled and nodded, I'll persuade him. If Li Baozhen was granted amnesty, he didn't want to stay in this room for a moment, so he got up quickly and came to Li Zixing's side. Li Shixing said, Baozhen, you need to do things well from beginning to end. Tomorrow you will first hand over the affairs of the Qinghuan State Rights Department, and then go back to the Dali Weaving Bureau. Li Baozhen nodded. Li Shixing actually had some headaches. It is completely conceivable that in the future, when Li Baozhen was at a bottleneck in the nascent soul realm, he would sit opposite to Qin Pingan, a demon manifested in his heart, where he repeatedly guessed the answer and quarreled endlessly. If he was a little late, there might still be several real arithmetic problems waiting for Li Baozhen. This problem is just a side dish. If he is not careful, Li Baozhen will lose his mind and become an ancient hermit who wears wild fox fur by the long chain of the river of time. Big liberty. Li Shixing said with his heart. Zheng Juzhong and Yudo left Baidi City and went to the outer world. Qin Pingan wondered, what are you going to do outside the sky? The two walked out of the study together, and Li Shixing and Qin Pingan roughly explained the situation of Beidasheng. Qin Pingan asked, "What is the outcome of this competition?" Li Hisung said, "Let's not lose if we don't win." Some insiders, Li Shixing should not reveal more secrets. For example, in Baidi City, Zheng Juzhong and Yu Dou said with a smile, "They have come." Yu Dou, who was wearing a robe with a sword on his back and followed his master across the world, replied on the spot, "Which was exactly what I wanted." Anyway, the two sides met and did not want to say a word. 24 realms, and among the 14 realms, they are the ones that are very capable of fighting, and they are not small in anger. This brief and concise appointment was not stopped by the most holy master, and Daozu also felt that it was nothing. Qin Pingan said, "This means that as long as Yu Dou sits in Baiyujing, even Mr. Zheng will lose?" Li Shixing nodded and said, "At least for the time being, what will happen in the future cannot be deduced." Qin Pingan looked strange. Li Shixing smiled and said, "Seek truth from facts. I have something to say, I have nothing to be ashamed of." No longer seeing a pair of golden eyes, Qin Pingan raised his hands and rubbed his face, helplessly said, "What the is going on with Li Baozhen? How can I be Mr. Li's younger brother and Xia Beoping's elder brother, and I can't be someone else today? Get used to him." Once Qin Pingan is included in a certain list in his heart, just like Xingyang Mountain in the past, then Li Baozhen's weaving officer has done his best. Li Shixing was obviously even more helpless. Every family has a scripture that is difficult to read. But don't worry, it's definitely not an example. Qin Pingan originally wanted to say a few more words, but just thought that the other party was Li Shixing. Forget it. There are some simple truths like, pride and extravagance are selfish, and smart people will only become more and more difficult to teach. Li Shixing probably guessed Qin Pingan's thoughts and said with a smile, "Don't worry." Qin Pingan suddenly raised his head. Li Shixing and Xiaomo also looked up at the sky. The battle outside the sky actually caused ripples in the vast sky, and layers of halos as big as a giant lake rippled. Qin Pingan murmured, "I thought it would be a more peaceful one fight. For example, the battlefield is located in a dojo similar to that of the most holy teacher or Taoist ancestor." Li Shixing said, "The battlefield is indeed located in a secret realm. It was thrown out by the Taoist ancestors, but it is relatively close to the vast world, but Yu Dou and Zheng Juzhong have nothing to hide." Bai Yujing's second headmaster once said that he was really invincible. The only one who would be used to talk about things and criticize them might be the only one who had never really fought with the two of them, so he was not really invincible. The little master of the vast world, Li Sheng. The sword immortal of the Great Wall of Sword Qi Qin Qingdu. As for Beidasheng Zheng Juzhong, the real body, the Yin God, and the outer body of the Yang already possessed 314 realms at the same time. Especially the last Zheng Juzhong is like a direct copy of Daozu. Zheng Juzhong's heart, art and Tao. All three. This matter, sooner or later, will be known to the world. With this prototype of the Tao in Zheng Juzhong's mind, it doesn't matter what the time of the outside world is. But even the mountain cultivators who have been informed of this amazing news one after another are still not aware of a deeper fact for the time being. In addition to being the ultimate in people, Zheng Juzhong still has a hidden geographical advantage, because Zheng Juzhong's dojo is equivalent to being in the vast world where Baidi City is located, and in the wild world where one of the 14 realms of Hadao is located. The Qingming world after Daozu left. The key is that when the patriarchs of the three sects are there, Zheng Juzhong can do this. What will happen to Zheng Juzhong after the patriarchs of the three sects disperse? Make an analogy. The realm of the monks on the mountain is high and low, like a majestic Dharma standing on the earth. Every ascension and the 14th realm in the world, of course, have their own greatness, but almost all the monks on the mountain have their own way. Their respective realms, their Dharma heights, have never touched the bottleneck of the sky. However, the height of Zheng Juzhong's Dharma looks like it can only be that high just because there are three sect patriarchs in the way. Li Shixing asked, "Did you bring any wine?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "What wine to drink?" Li Shixing smiled and said, "The glutinous rice wine in our hometown is fine." Qin Pingan took out a pot of Dong Bancheng's glutinous rice wine from his sleeve and handed it to Li Shixing. He couldn't help laughing. "It looks like it's coming, but it's not cheap. Just because there is a golden signboard of Lizhu, coupled with the folk kiln celadone jug fired in the small town Longyao, it is almost sold for the price of Xinjia wine, and some people really buy it." Li Shixing took a sip of the soft-flavored glutinous rice wine and said, "I'm not speaking ill of Zheng Juzhong. Leaving aside his Taoism, Zheng Juzhong wants to seek surgery outside of surgery. I have to be a little wary of him because of the number of cultivation paths I have taken, and all the current and future cultivators of the 14th realm need to be careful as well, because no one knows whether the single plank bridge under their feet is there or not. Maybe one day it will be in contact with Zheng Zhezhong's road, and there will be a battle for the road inexplicably. Qin Pingan nodded. Li Shixing smiled and said, I have a heart. I have to admit one thing, it seems that Jing Juzhong has been the most free for thousands of years. Li Shixing said, what is the effect of the idea? Qin Pingan said, thoughts arise naturally, which is more than half less than that of senior brother Cui back then. Try to curb your thoughts at least half more than Cui Dongshan. Li Shixing nodded and said, it's amazing. The former is difficult in the word natural, and the latter's restraint and cessation are not the sitting and forgetting concentration of ordinary Qi practitioners. It is also different from the xianxia of Baiyujing Taoist officials and the Zen meditation of Buddhism. Li Shixing said with a smile. Aquarius followed sect Master Cui and the others on the ferry back to their hometown. I will go to protect the Taoist. Qin Pingan quickly thanked him and Li Shixing replied angrily, you are her brother. Xiaomo held back his laughter. Qin Pingan glanced at the sky, took a deep breath, retracted his gaze and said goodbye to Li Shixing, who returned the salute. Li Shixing took the lead to leave Xuanhuan country and went to Lealonking at the southern end of Aquarius Island. Xiaomo suddenly said in his heart, young master, I want to accept Lu Min as a disciple. Qin Pingan asked curiously, is he Jianxiu? Xiaomo shook his head and said, no. Qin Pingan suddenly realized that Xiaomo was not only proficient in swordsmanship, but also learned a variety of things. It was more than enough to teach Lu Min, who was in the middle five. Xiaomo said, I accept Lu Min as an anonymous disciple. He has nothing to do with Luopa Mountain. Qin Pingan nodded and said, I can rest assured that you accept the apprentice. But you have to let him hang for a few days. Forget it, there is no difference, you and Lu Min can just talk about it. Lu Min was smart enough and thoughtful enough to meet a master like Xiaomo, which seemed to be an immortal family fate that Lu Min should have hit. Taking Xiaoma back to Luopao Mountain, Qin Pingan went to the bamboo building first, and then hurried to see senior brother Jun Qian. On the mountain, Xiego actually recovered his true face, and in the posture of Beijing, drinking with senior brother Jun Qian over there, it can be said that he drank heavily, and he no longer looked like a charming girl. Seeing Xiaomo returning to the mountain, Beijing just snorted and smiled. Qin Pingan called out to senior brother Jun Qian. Lu Shirlu nodded with a smile, and asked junior brother and Xiaomo to sit down and drink together. Qin Pingan hesitated. Jun Qian smiled and said, Bai Yi was dragged by Wei Shanjun to see Mr. Da in Piyun Mountain, and the millet grains followed along. Qin Pingan didn't think about going to Piyun Mountain to meet Bei. Treating guests like this is too out of place. Maybe even if the younger brother is going, Jun Qian, who is a senior brother, will stop him. Bai Jing and Xiaomo are old acquaintances with Jun Qian. Of course they were not friends in the ancient times. Relatively speaking, Jun Qian and Xiaomo are more familiar. Jun Qian said, Mr. Mo, have a drink here, have a drink, and you can go to the Qingming world at any time. The old Guanzhou is waiting for you at Mingyue Haotsai, an old friend whom you haven't seen in 10,000 years. You can then have a second meal. Xiaomo smiled and nodded. You can accompany Mr. Jun Qian to drink more. The vast world, the Qingming world, the Lotus world and the latest colorful world, the roads that cross the world are relatively stable, like the tributaries of the long river of time that have been built with embankments. In addition to reminiscing about the past with the master of Bixiao Cave, Xiaoma also had two things instructed by his son, one of which was related to the credit moon, the Taoist companion of sect Master Lu. Before Taoist Bixiao visited Luopao Mountain, he made a deal with sect Master Cui and took away the authentic work of the Bluestone Cliff with his supernatural powers. The Bluestone Cliff with many pits and seats on the Longshu River is commonly known as Qingnia Bay by the people of the town. Cui Dongshan, who had carefully inspected the various landscapes in Lizhu Cave, could not find the slightest oddity, and was taken away by the old master. No wonder Cui Dongshan failed to pick up this big leak. First, the realm is not enough, and secondly, in this old site of Lizidongshan, there are few people and places that can be called strange and mysterious. The young man has nothing to do with it, there are always times when he is wrong. That green cliff is a moon palace mirror that once fell into the bottom of the lotus flower. Inside the mirror is a round of the ancient bright moon with a high rank. A little bit of consonance, the spirit of eternity. As for how this treasure traveled all the way to the Lizhu Cave, and took root and turned into a stone cliff, it must be related to the last real dragon in the world. As for Gu Kan's guess to Lu Xianying, it can't be said to be off topic. In fact, he did guess a part of the facts, and it was related to Xianxuan, the master of Lingfei Palace of Dongting, and Qiunshan, the old Baiyue. It's just that the most important opportunity of the credit month is to return to the bright moon in bright colors. It's just that there is nothing left to return to the master. Last time Lao Guanzhu paid a lot of money to buy the Green Cliff, and Qin Pingan wanted to buy it back again. Previously, Cui Dongshan bargained for it, but this time it was replaced by Xiao Mo. If there is no Xiao Mo, it is estimated that there is no need to talk about it. As for the second matter, it has to do with the female warrior Tsin Yuanji. Because Taoist Bixiao was at the gate of the mountain at the time, and he even chatted with Tsin Yuanji, who was walking on Jiling Peak Shinto every day, and asked her if her name was Tsin Yuanji. Her surname, Tsin, is interpreted as the mountain is small and high, and the appearance is extremely steep, and the Mandarin duck machine is more popular and easy to understand. Qin Pingan had been in Yunlu before and asked Lu Qin, Tsin Yuanji and her family, whether it was the Longzhou he moved to and then Luopao Mountain. Lu Qin just pretended to be stupid. Before Xiao Mo travels far, reminds Xiago again. Bai Jing just waved his hand, indicating that with her in Luopao Mountain, it would be no accident for Qin Shanju to retreat. When Xiao Mo walked into the courtyard, Hua Hong flew into the sky. Bai Jing always sat at the table, she frowned and took a sip of wine. Jun Qian laughed loudly, "He'll just say he won't be jealous." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Not necessarily." Bai Jing's eyes lit up and he regained the appearance of a girl with a mink hat. "Really?" Qin Pingan said, "Guess not sure." Xiago rubbed his mink hat and pouted, "Ask Mr. Zhu and you'll be right." In the blue sky, two bright moons hang together. Like the eyes of a beautiful woman, the place where you stare is the world. The tall old Guanzhu walked out of the hut. The Taoist boy squatting on the ground is a bit strange, and there are people who need their master to go out to entertain guests. There was a thin and shabby Taoist priest outside the house. He raised his eyelids and saw a dazzling sword light piercing the sky, and in an instant it was in the bright moon. It was an unfamiliar face with restrained sword energy, yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo stick, looking harmless to humans and animals and youthful appearance. As soon as the old Guanzhu met, he asked with a smile, "Have you ever been slept by her?" Xiao Mo said helplessly, "Don't talk about this." But Lao Guanzhu did not let this friend go. "I persuaded you a long time ago, look away, you sleep with her and she sleeps with you, what's the difference, whoever sleeps and who doesn't sleep?" Xiao Mo said, "Fellow Taoist Bai Xiao, if you keep chatting like this, I'll leave." The two disciples inside and outside the room were extremely curious, not knowing who the other was, how they could make master so invisible. Their master is not a Taoist priest who likes to joke with people. The key point is that the other party can still leave with one sentence. Lao Guanzhu laughed and stretched out his hand to grab Xiao Mo's arm. "Go drink, it's still homebrewed wine, and see if the craftsmanship has improved a little compared to the past." Xiao Mo said in his heart, "There are two things that I need to discuss with Taoist Bai Xiao. Isn't it the ownership of the ancient mirror and the foot of a little girl?" Lao Guanzhu complained, "Fellow Taoist, I haven't seen each other in 10,000 years, it's not easy to meet again, how can we talk about such trivial things as soon as we meet, it's extremely boring. You really want to be willing to talk about the idle world, even if it's the cheap nephew who is talking about the poor." "What?" Lao Guanzhu's so-called cheap nephew of course is Bai Yujing Lu, who is calling on the pole to call his uncle. Lu Qin has 5 dreams and 7 heart signs, one of which is 1 dream and 1 heart sign, and it is difficult to tell whether one is 1 or 2. In addition, the bone-real man who hid like a fish that slipped through the net, and the scholar xuanhuan who had been taken back by Lu Qin, were the second of the 5 dreams. Lotus flower blessed land, Eugenie who once got the silver lotus Dao crown, the dumb as a wooden chicken, and the Oriole who can test the literary movement, is the second of the 7 heart signs that Lu Qin manifested from the Dao on the road of cultivation. Xiao Mo was pulled and sat beside a wooden table. The tabletop moved slightly like water patterns. Upon closer inspection, it was actually another lotus flower blessed land that was different from the lotus root blessed land. Before sitting down, Xiao Mo did not forget to introduce himself with a smile to the young Taoist priest. Wang Yuanlu, who had just become a disciple of Lao Guanzhu for a few days, was flattered. The thin Taoist priest in cotton robes had already stood by the table with his hands tied. Hearing the introduction of the senior, Wang Yuanlu hurriedly bowed his head. It was almost a no-brainer. Lao Guanzhu commented with a smile on his pioneering disciple, "Yener is bad but good seedling." Wang Yuanlu felt that these two statements had nothing to do with him, but he didn't have the courage to refute them. Xiao Mo nodded and said, it is rare to have a good aptitude for cultivation. As for the person in the room who helped concoct alchemy, let's not mention it. The only thing that is desirable is that he is still diligent in cultivating the Tao. It's a late bloomer, it doesn't delay him to become a rising star. As for cultivation, as long as he reaches the threshold of aptitude, he will have to compete with acquired hard work and a little luck. Since he has the Tao heart to practice diligently, and he is the named disciple of fellow Taoist Bixiao, luck can make a difference. No matter where he goes, he must have a place on the top of the mountain in the future. The little Taoist boy in the house who was busy alchemy, when he heard these heartwarming words, almost burst into tears on the spot without being grateful. The old Guanju snorted, "It looks like the Taoist friend hasn't had a drink yet." Xiaomo stretched out his hand and patted the table and said with a smile, as Taoist Bixiao said, "Let's get down to business first." "Of course it's a drink." Lao Guanju waved his sleeves, and the table was filled with 3 kinds of homebrewed wine and 3 white bowls. The 3 vintages of immortal brewing are clearly named Centennial, Xianxia, Long Live. After listening to Taoist Bixiao's explanation, Xiaomo first picked up a pot of century-old wine, and drank the other 2 wines in no hurry. One of the blessings in life is that the hardships come to an end, and the situation gradually improves. After removing the mud seal, Xiaomo filled a bowl of wine, raised his head and took a sip, and poured 2 more bowls, all of which he drank in one gulp. Brewing and drinking with fellow Taoist Bixiao, I never know what persuasion is. Lao Guanju also drank like this, accompanied Xiaomo, and drank 3 bowls in a row. Lao Guanju suddenly frowned and said, "What's the matter, that flying sword?" Xiaomo smiled and said, "I took it out and gave it to a little girl with good qualifications." Wang Yuanlu had already moved and went under the eaves of the thatched hut, squatting with his hands in his sleeves, his eyelids trembled. "The Ascension realm was purely a sword cultivator, are you doing things so boldly?" Lao Guanju raised his hand and calculated with his fingers, "This little girl's talent is good, and she belongs to the kind of natural talent that came into being. If you recognize the status of master and apprentice, this flying sword of your life will not be the same. It's not a free gift." Xiaomo shook his head and said, "Without the name of master and apprentice, it doesn't matter." Lao Guanju laughed and said, "As expected of a Taoist friend, that's the right way." The 100-year-old wine on the table is the least in quantity. This shows the way of hospitality of the master of Bixiao Cave. Xiaomo patted his head, got up immediately, took out 2 greeting cards from his sleeves, walked to the thatched hut, and gave them to the young Taoist priest under the eaves and the alchemy boy in the house. I didn't show any kindness to this generous mountain senior, one was really poor and the other was sincere when he was young. When Xiaomo returned to his seat, Lao Guanju asked in a heartfelt voice, "When will the debt be repaid and the freedom truly restored?" Xiaomo was in high spirits and pointed at the table full of drinks. "A table, 2 Taoist friends, 3 kinds of wine, wouldn't you be comfortable long ago?" Lao Guanju smiled and nodded and asked, "Have you met Jing Juzhong? This guy you do outside the sky. The real fight is definitely a real fight, but both sides have a tacit understanding and will not fight to the death. After all, it is impossible to commit. When they have reached their level they should not shake their hands too early, except for the few tricks at the bottom of the box. Otherwise, even if it is the kind of point-to-point exchange of Taoism, the depth of Taoism, the number of means, the level of lethality, and the strength of defense are all almost there." Xiaomo shook his head and said, "I haven't met this Zheng Qingzhu yet." The old Guanju said casually, "The ancient mirror you bring back to Luapa Mountain. As for the woman named Xinyuanji, her roots are roughly related to a certain sect in Juzhou under the Qingming world, but Xinyuanji has some origins. The predecessor of the machine is not as big as the one named Zhu Lu, so Qin Pingan doesn't have to think about it, the past is over. Lu Qin has always been on the street without wiping his ass." Xiaomo didn't even thank him, he just lifted the wine bowl and drank it all in one go. Quite a matter of course. Obviously, Qin Pingan still underestimated the personal friendship between Xiaomo and Lao Guanju. Lao Guanju smiled for no reason and said, "Reminiscing back then, there was such a long line of people who followed behind the buttocks of Taoist priests with wooden hairpins, walking on the road, winding like snakes. I miss them very much." Xiaomo nodded, remembering that the dumb boy who walked at the back of the team back then was the current Daozu. At that time the small group of early Taoist priests who followed the Xianhui Taoist priest were almost all enlightened, and at worst they were also earth immortals. Lao Guanju sighed, "The way of heaven is the way of heaven." Xiaomo said, "Whether it's your desire to seek the Tao or your fighting skills, you are not as good as him." Although the guest's words were truthful, I still heard the young man's hair standing on end, his body tense, and he was afraid that if the wine table was flipped outside, a fight would happen. Wang Yuanlu put his hands in his sleeves, widened his eyes, and stared blankly at the senior who couldn't open the pot and lift it. After he learned it, he could still be a visitor like this? They knew very well that this was one of the words that Master and his elders disliked the most. No one. Lu Chen didn't dare to say it, the female crown Wuzhou also didn't dare to say it, Bai Yujing Tianxian Daoist didn't dare to say it, and even the mountain monks in the whole Qingming world dared to say it. I never thought that Lao Guanju just raised the wine bowl and said with a smile, "Drink and drink." Xiao Mo's eyes were clear and he said with a smile, "But am only friends with the master of Bixiao Cave in Luobaotan. The wine is good and the Taoist friend is even better." The old master laughed out loud and was in a good mood. On the other side of Luopao Mountain, Li Huai returned to the ancestral house with Mei Wei Taijin, failing to see Chen Pingan and Pei Qian. Unfortunately, most of the neighbors in the early years moved to the state city. That's fine, so I don't need Li Huai to explain anything. In fact, when he was a child, when he wore open-crotch pants, Li Huai, who had a big head and a head, often got together with women and aunts and listened to them talking about their parents' shortcomings. Lin Yupu and Dong Banqing went to Nujiadu together and received a classmate from the capital of Dali. It was Shi Jiachuan, who was already a married woman and even had a child. Of course, it was impossible for a woman to make two braids like she did when she was a child. Shi Jiachuan joked, "Dong Shuijing, don't stand up for justice. I have heard of your name in the capital, and if you are so rich, you will not rent a Xianxia ferry for me to show off so that I can pretend to be back on the mountain." Rich man? Dong Shuijing smiled and said, "Wealth is not revealed." Lin Shuyi sneered and said, "Shi Jiachuan, you may not be clear, he was Dong Banqing a few years ago, and now we should call him Dong Banzhou. Don't let the fairy in his name take you for a ride, even if you let Dong Banzhou give it away in vain. You are nothing but a ferry boat on the mountain, you just dig a little money out of his fingernails." Dong Shuijing said angrily, "Lin Yupu, shut up, don't forget that you still owe me 100 immortal money, so you'll be happy only if I charge you some interest?" Shi Jiachuan clicked his tongue and looked at Dong Shuijing vigorously. "When I was in school, I always felt that I was the one who planned the most, and I will definitely be able to do big business and make big money in the future. Silver, I never thought that you are the richest in the end. I can't see it, I really can't see it. If I knew that, I would have bowed to you at that time." Dong Shuijing asked with a smile, "Should I go to live at Luapa Mountain, or should I help you find a place in the county or prefecture?" Lin Shuyi said, "I must go to the state city. Xinjiaans are all surnamed Dong." Shi Jiachuan sighed with a smile in his eyes and joked, "I knew this earlier, but when I was in the school I was sticking to you no matter whether it is Dali Jingqing or Xinjia Ferry. Where to buy things now depends on the price." Dong Shuijing looked helpless. Shi Jiachuan covered his mouth and smiled and said, "I still have a daughter and I haven't found a good family yet. You must have seen it at the last Beijing wedding banquet. Dong Shuijing, do you have any ideas?" Lin Shou smiled and said, "Dong Banzhou, what are you still doing? Hurry up and call your mother-in-law." Dong Shuijing said with a dark face, "Don't go too far with horn braids. There must be a limit to joking, don't imitate Lin Yupu." Shi Jiachuan came back to his senses, his eyes widened and he stared at Lin Shuyi blankly. Lin Yupu? A good Lin Shuyi, remembering that Yuaning was only a few years old, it was enough to scare people, but now it turns out to be Yupujing, the fairy master. Dong Shuijing nodded and said, "No, now the nose is not the nose, the eyes are not the eyes, and I usually speak sideways." Shi Jiachuan was still childish, he burst into laughter. He finally stopped laughing, reached out and rubbed the corners of his eyes and waved his hand. "Stop joking, Dong Shuijing, just help me find a place to settle in the town. Chuzhou City is far from Luopao Mountain. It's still too far, I'm not as immortal as you, the clouds and mists are all commonplace. I get seasick all the way and I feel more uncomfortable than being pregnant. I really suffer. It's good to live in a small town and know the way. Yes, I can take a walk every day." Dong Shuijing nodded and said, "I have houses on Fulu Street and Taoya Alley, but you can pick one if you hang it in someone else's name." Lin Shou smiled. Shi Jiachuan chose the house in Taoya Lane, and Dong Shuijing offered a talisman boat, saying that Shi Jiachuan was seasick and asked Lin Yupu, who was at a higher level, to help steer. At the entrance of the house in Taoya Lane, Dong Shuijing opened the door, bypassed a shadow wall made of Xinjia stone, entered the front yard and asked Shi Jiachuan if he was satisfied. Shi Jiachuan said that he dreamed of living here when he was a child. Unsatisfactory. Dong Shuijing handed another set of keys to Shi Jiachuan, saying that the house had been empty for a long time, and it was only cleaned regularly, so soon several women from the Zhou Qingyan would come here to clean the courtyard. Lin Shui still laughed and Shi Jiachuan was just tsk. The thankless Dong Xuejing felt aggrieved and scolded with a smile. When Lin Shui asked if there was any tea prepared in your house, Dong Xuejing said that he had never been here before so he didn't know, so if he wanted to drink tea he would find it by himself. As soon as Lin Shui went to rummage through the boxes, probably because the new tea had not been released this year, he couldn't find it, so they chatted with Shi Jiachuan for a while, and then went to Li Huai. Shi Jiachuan didn't follow and said that she was going for a walk. She left the yard and walked in her hometown alone. The New Year's shop in Qilong Alley was adjacent to the Chaotu shop. It was Shi Jiachen's family's property in the beginning, but later moved there because of the family's relocation. After arriving in the capital, it was sold to Qin Pingan. The woman with crow's feet at the corner of her eyes bought a few cakes at the New Year's shop. Shi Jiachuan squinted and smiled, and the taste was still very good. There's nothing wrong with being a husband and a child over the years. As for the classmates of the school in the past, one by one she has grown up and she just needs to be happy for them. Shi Jiachuan was walking, feeling sad for no reason, missing Mr. Qi. I heard Lin Shui say that Qin Pingan also opened a school in a small village. For some reason, Shi Jiachuan was not surprised at all. She remembered that when she was young, she once turned her head and looked out the window, and saw a dark and thin boy with straw sandals wandering outside the door. He opened and pursed his mouth several times, raised the back of his hand and wiped his forehead, and finally called out Mr. Qi. Mr. Qi walked out of the school and stood in front of the young man. The slender teaching teacher bowed slightly, and the shy young man in straw sandals handed out a letter in both hands. Zhao Yao, the minister of the Ministry of Punishment, called Wu Yuan, the prefect of Chu Prefecture, to drink together. Instead of choosing the official residence of the prefect of Chuzhou, he chose a restaurant. The minister of the Ministry of Households, Zhongguan, called Jing the prefect of Baoshi County. With Ma Yuan, who was transferred from a country to the Minister of Punishment, has the biggest official hat. He is also the head of the Ma family in Xianghu Kingdom, so he sits on the throne. Outside an old school in a small town that had been dusty for many years, the old master, who had also taught here for many years, turned his head and saw the burly man. Ma Zhan's lips moved slightly and he whispered, "Senior brother Junqian." Junqian patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "When you see Mr. Don't be speechless. Back then, among our group, you and Xiaodong were the only ones who were the best at flattering. Sincerely, sir, love to hear. We are not as good as you two in this matter." Ma Zhan breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Now that we have Qin Pingan, junior brother Mao and I can rest." Junqian stared, "What?" Ma Zhan immediately changed his tune and said, "It's junior brother. Back then, on Mr. S side, I didn't see you who liked to pose with us juniors so much." Junqian said, "Junior brother is still different from the two of you. He's not flattering." Ma Zhan asked with a smile, "What is that?" Junqian thought about it seriously, but couldn't think of a more appropriate way of saying it. Pei Qian separated from her master. After leaving King Xingguo Jawadu, she returned to Huaihuang County alone and walked in a small alley that she was familiar with. She remembered that she went to school when she was a child and there was often a white goose here. Like squatting, the two sides chased and slapped each other, such as the enemies of the rivers and lakes met. They were extremely jealous and they had to fight every day. When the fight started, she grabbed the white goose by the neck and threw it against the wall. "Little brother, let you go." Of course she will pay attention. Such a well-matched master, after all, is hard to find and must be cherished. It's just that there was a small incident of losing money later, so she took the guardian of the Dharma to the left and right of riding the dragon lane and took a detour. At that time, when the master was not at home, Xia Heaton felt that there was nothing to say. It is said in the book that it is difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. In the past, Nvexia Pei was alone in the capital city of Nanyuan, but she took grievances as food every day and she was full, but she could not come to master's house and patronize it every day. Immortal life cannot bear the slightest grievance. Saying so, but it is a grievance that is hard to let go, who makes Xia Heaton have a good memory. It's just that when he followed his little brother to the Great Wall of Sword Qi and saw his master, Xiao Heaton really felt nothing. The legendary Great Wall of Sword Qi is indeed higher than the sea of clouds. At night, there are 3 bright moons overhead, the sky is high and the earth is wide. When returning to his hometown, the big white goose said that every grievance in our hearts is a barnyard grass in the rice field. The big white goose also said that as long as a person's heart is broad enough, he can ignore a few emerging barnyard grass. Pei Qian felt that what the big white goose said was quite reasonable, at least he had the success of his master. Going down the steps of Riding Dragon Lane today, Pei Qian went to Chaotu's shop to greet Zhao Denggao and Tianjiuer. After chatting a few words, he found that there was a Taoist priest who was the second shopkeeper in the shop. The other party claimed to be Lin Feijing and did not have a Taoist title. Now he is apprenticing to Taoist master Yu Xianwei, not a second shopkeeper but doing errands here. Pei Qian walked into the New Year's shop next door, and the little mute who was reading a book on the bench behind the counter saw Master. His lips moved slightly, and his voice was as thin as a mosquito. Pei Qian just pretended not to hear it. He was a disciple of others, which was really not like himself. When I was a child, every time I called Master, it always rang in the sky. Shi Ro was busy in the backyard of the shop. Pei Qian opened the curtain, came to the backyard and said with a smile, "Shopkeeper Shi." Shi Ro said softly, "I'm back." Pei Qian snorted, "Master asked us to go back to Luopao Mountain in the near future." Shi Ro asked, "Do you guys go up the mountain after dinner?" Pei Qian nodded and smiled, "I stepped into the shop by stepping on it." Shi Ro looked at the slender young woman. Now she is as knowledgeable as someone who has come out of a scholarly family. This was something that she never dared to think about a few years ago. When Pei Qian was still a little black charcoal, it was really noisy. Pei Qian took out a gift from his sleeve and said in a low voice, "Sister Shiro, I bought it on the way. I went to the next door first. Sister Jura also has a share." Shi Ro hurriedly stopped her work, rubbed her hands, took it with a smile and thanked Pei Qian. Over the old dragon city, there was a cross-continental ferry from Tonggishao. The boy in white with a mole between his eyebrows sat on the rail of the boat, smiling and chatting non-stop. That's called flattery, and there was a man standing beside the railing. The woman in red with the jug hanging and the knife wearing a knife is probably called brine and tofu. In such a scene I was very envious when I saw "thank you" on the side but dared not show it. Yulu asked Cui Dongshan if the ferry would be moored somewhere in the Sea of Clouds, because I heard that there is a rare cloud-footed fish there. He was going to throw a rod and go fishing. Cui Dongshan said that it would be non-stop, but it's okay, we have money. Chao Qingqing was teaching Jing Yugan some exegesis tips and reading experience. Cui Dongshan turned his head and said that he did it again. This is a unique mental method that your brother Chao finally figured out. The village school on the side of Yenzhou Mansion in Yunzhou. After class today, the Mengtong boys dispersed in a hurry, those who fished for fish, and some who put paper kites to go, each in groups. Zhao Shusha was walking, and Ningji was a little angry for his husband because there was another Mengtong who dropped out, and it was the third one. At first, it was a savage aunt who likes to scold the streets and forcibly dragged her own children. Not long ago, there was another one who complained that the husband should not beat the ruler. Today, a parent who disliked the school's unreliable schoolwork arrangements and transferred them to Wuxi village. Going to school in the smoke from the kitchen, among the green mountains and green waters, Qin Pingan rested on the bamboo chair and rubbed his eyebrows. The paper was superficial. Teaching is really not easy. He went to the stream, helped wash his trousers, and also had some excuses to go to the toilet. Meng Tong was so courageous that he would not go back to the village school once he left. He only cared about playing in the countryside. When he saw the teacher in blue shirts and cloth shoes, he came to arrest people. Either dodge or run away. But fortunately there are still many immature faces, a pair of clear eyes with a similar appearance, reading and literacy every day and the sound of books every day. Qin Pingan turned his head and stared blankly at the string of bells under the eaves. Qin Pingan slowly retracted his gaze, closed his eyes lightly, put his hands on his stomach and listened with erect ears. The bells seemed to keep guests talking to the passing spring breeze whisper, ding dong ding 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 dong. Sword of Coming Chapter 1187. Qin Pingan brought Guizhuzhou, Xiego and Zhang Lv Long Life together to enter the Lotus Root Blessed Land, and they had to go to the Fox Country, which was still closed. Taking the same talisman boat and passing through the layers of clouds, Xiego was really bored, so he just stood at the bow of the boat, shouting and drinking, handing out his palm again and again, to disperse the sea of clouds on both sides or in the cloud pile. Punch a hole in it. Xiao Mo went to Qingming World to drink and she was in a bad mood. Qin Pingan ordered some cakes from his New Year's shop, opened the food box, and handed Guizhuzhou a piece of almond cake. Guizhuzhou took it with both hands, raised it above his head, thanked the master for the reward and then swallowed it. Qin Pingan gave her and Changxing handed over a piece of peach cake, smiled and let Guizhuzhou eat slowly. Changming sat beside the mountain master, squinting and smiling. The scenery in the world, the mountains and rivers are like a magnificent picture. Mia, this painting is also. Xiego put away his boxing skills, made an angry Dantian gesture. sat next to the leader of the alliance on the top of his own hill, and asked, "Guizhuzhou, that Chao Ci is really invincible in boxing? Even our mountain leader can't win?" On Shanzhu Chen's side, Xiego was inconvenient to call Guizhuzhou the leader of the alliance. Chen Pingan is actually very clear, but the mountain owner has always turned a blind eye and pretended not to know about these hilltops that form gangs. Guizhuzhou nodded. "It has to be powerful. I can beat master. Can it be powerful? Chao Ci is simply a mess and must be invincible in martial arts, but in the final analysis, Chao Ci still takes advantage of being older than my master. If he was born a few days or a few months late, he might end up eating dust behind my master's ass. If Chao Ci's boxing skills are not very good, how can the master who loses the boxing handle himself?" Xiego nodded vigorously, agreeing. Changming said in his heart, "Master, there is no native sword cultivator in the blessed land." As the hidden historian of this lotus root-blessed land, Zhang Lu Changming has been closely watching the trend of the whole world over the years. Qin Pingan also said in his heart, "It may be a kind of rejection of me. After the discussion is over, I will put away the talisman clone used to observe the Tao." Zhang Lu, who finally got the exact answer, said cautiously, "Young master, don't wait any longer?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "Don't ask for anything in your life. I want to delay the birth date of the first sword cultivator in the blessed land. People are greedy and Taoism is to blame." Zhuang Tian's great fortune continued to persuade him, "Why is your son being greedy? You will take the blame if you don't take it, even if there is a sword repair a few years later. I don't believe in Fang Tian." I really can't understand the sincerity of the young master. Maybe the other party is waiting for tomorrow's autumn lake. The result of that discussion? Qin Pingan nodded and said, "It's possible. He is observing the heaven and earth of lotus root blessed land, and he wants to come to this world to observe himself. When he was a teenager, he carried his sword into the depths of lotus flower by mistake, and settled in the capital of Nanyuan. He once met the abbot of the temple who cultivated Buddha only in ordinary affairs at Xinxiang Temple. The old monk once said similar words. Probably just as Changming said, Qin Pingan is also waiting for the sword cultivator to appear in this world. This illusory avenue of heaven and earth, in the dark, is also waiting for his words and deeds, the master of the mountain and the titular master of the blessed land. Remember that Hauranjia, there was a saying in the chapter of the great politics at birth? A gentleman says what he says must be done and then he says it, and what he does must be what he says and then does it. Qin Pingan explained with a smile, "I want to maintain the normal words and deeds, thinking and traveling of the 9 talisman clones. It is very expensive. Every action, every word and even every thought requires expenses. I am at the village school. The true spirit of heaven and earth chi, consuming spiritual energy, isn't it just a piece of fairy money? After Tomb Sweeping Day, I will take back all the private affairs in the capital of Yuxuan Kingdom, and then I will retreat, and try to restore the cultivation of the upper 5 realms as soon as possible. 7 shows and 2 are hidden. It's good to form a formation. It can prevent any accident in the mind just in case it can't be recovered. Doppelganger mountains and rivers, like kites with broken strings, float between the heavens and the earth. In fact, there is no such extra expense. How long the clone can wander outside depends on the quality of the talisman material." Changming said helplessly, "Young master's excuse is really lame. Put away all the talisman clones, but something has come to an end, and the dust has settled. With the young master's talisman accomplishments that are close to everyone's, can't he sacrifice another avatar to entrust his heart?" Seeing that the young master no longer spoke, Changmin had no choice but to offer a trump card. "Young master, as a pure sword cultivator, whether you are enterprising or not is a huge difference in your achievements." Qin Pingan laughed dumbly and picked up a piece of cake after chewing it carefully. He teased, "It's the clever trick that Chief Zhou taught to the master of the mountain gate. Come on, you two love each other's family, and you will win over the old cook and vice accountant in the future. Raising a mountain again, wouldn't it make me, the owner of the mountain who dumped the palm of my hand, empty it?" Changxing also found this statement interesting. His expression was soft and he laughed. Now that the son has a decision in his heart, if she doesn't give up, it will be boring. Xiego looks like he has seen a ghost. The law of our Luapa mountain has a long life. How can we still laugh like this? Really scary. Qin Pingan was actually quite embarrassed. If he wanted to retreat in Jai's Feng, he needed to break through and return to the Jade Pure realm, so he had to take back all the mustard seeds. Qin Pingan certainly didn't want to let go of the benefits of this Taoist view of, the first sword cultivator between heaven and earth is in harmony with the right time and place, and came into being as the times require. But when Qin Pingan retreats, there will inevitably be a gap in the Taoist viewing process. If the first sword cultivator happens to be born in blessed land during this period, then Qin Pingan will not only be embarrassed as a simple matter, because it means this Fangtiandi Avenue does not recognize that he once carried a sword into the blessed land when he was young, and now he has become a god. As the old saying goes, 8 feet in one's life are hard to find. If it is really a pure sword cultivator with no distractions, of course he can force the 2 feet, but he will fight with heaven and earth on the road. So this is why Qin Pingan took Xiaoma to the capital of Dali before. During the walk he looked up and saw the paper kite released by the child. Why did Qin Pingan say, "You are pure swordsman," instead of "us"? Aside from occasionally picking up flying swords from a basket and saying strange things, Qin Pingan is usually more cautious when talking to people. Once you compete with the lotus root blessed land for this 2-foot life, if you do, seeing the birth of the first sword cultivator with your own eyes is of course the best result, because it means that the world here recognizes Qin Pingan and Luopao Mountain as the blessed land. The identity of the owner. But before the retreat, if it still fails, there are 3 results waiting for Qin Pingan. First, during Qin Pingan's retreat, xianxia was born, just like the words of Fudi Avenue and Luopao Mountain, both well water does not violate river water. Second, after Qin Pingan retreated, xianxia had not yet appeared, and he chose to continue to watch Taoism. The world saw his sincerity and let Qin Pingan get what he wanted. This result is actually very good. Good things are not afraid of being late. The host master identity, both name and real. Third, Qin Pingan's temper has come up, and the blessed land will not give Qin Pingan this immortal fate, and Qin Pingan will continue to observe Taoism for a day, then there will be no one in this world for a day to have a local sword cultivator, dragged on both sides, depends on who consumes energy who passed. If it is really useful, 10,000 years ago I wouldn't after passing by so many Dao relationships, he has long been a pure sword cultivator of the 14th realm. Qin Pingan was reluctant to give up on this at the time, and even gave a sufficiently brazen reason. Little Mo, what if it happens, what if I wait for 10,000 years and I will go out in the future and I will also be surrounded by a young boy. Strange, fly ascension sword cultivator with the 14 realm sword cultivator, can the pomp be the same? So Xiaomo recommended to his son the 2 best candidates in his heart, Chief Zhou and Bai Jing. It is said that Chief Zhou is also an old man of the blessed land, and his realm is not low. Since it is a chance, it is better to let Chief Zhou try it. As for Bai Jing, the sword training qualification is good enough, the realm is high enough, and the Ascension realm has been completed long ago. It is impossible to say that this world is waiting for such a sword cultivator to give Bai Jing a Dao, which can help her become one of the 14th environment and can get with an equal remuneration. Bai Jing, who has entered the 14th realm, will naturally become the biggest protector of the entire lotus root blessed land. After that, Xiaoma mentioned 2 more alternate candidates to come here to observe Taoism, Chao Qingqing, a true local Qi practitioner from blessed land, and Guizhuzhou from Jianqi Great Wall in his hometown. Their realm is still too low, so they need Luopeishan to help them open the eyes of the sky, before they can see the way. When saying the idiom worthy of the name, Xiao Mo emphasized his tone. An old house where a treasure. What's more, there is still Xiao Mo who has 1,000 years of Taoism. As expected of Xiao Mo who can make wine with the master of Bixiao Cave, his vision and knowledge of swordsmanship are all very high. Maybe apart from not being able to beat Bai Jing, Xiao Mo actually has no shortcomings? Therefore Qin Pingan made a new decision. He continued to observe Taoism without interruption, and when he retreated, he would let Chao Qingqing fill in the gaps in Taoism. But during this period, Qin Pingan intentionally brought Bai Jing and Guizhuzhou into the blessed land, which was regarded as a familiar face with the lotus root blessed land. This is the first time that Guizhuzhou wandered around the blessed land of the world. In the past few years, there have been a series of mysterious landscapes in the colorful world. Several of them are actually not inferior to the 36 little caves and the 72 blessed lands, but they have never been entitled, some are named, and they have not been widely known on the mountain and down the mountain. Flow biography, don't underestimate this kind of word of mouth. The words spoken in the world can be both well known and well received. Invisibly, it is an alternative seal. Xiego said in a low voice, Guizhuzhou, I heard that your senior sister Pei has several self-created fist moves, and she has great spirit. I heard some gossip from the Deli Suedu and Jinjiaza battlefields, saying that Pei Qian's fist, great spirit as long as she handed out a punch, the nearby warriors saw it, and they wanted to kowtow to show their respect? Guizhuzhou laughed. Xiego asked, Then if she asks Chao Ci about boxing or competes with the mountain master, wouldn't she? Guizhuzhou pretended to take a breath. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Chao Ci is a pure martial artist, but I am different. Apart from being a pure martial artist, I am also a sword cultivator, a cultivator of Fulu. Xiego suddenly realized with a boxing palm, so it is. Our mountain master is very good at choosing dishes, and his cooking skills are not bad. It's no wonder that every time everyone eats the rich food of the old cook or the mountain and wild offerings, the mountain owner occasionally sours out a similar sentence. What if I cook with heart and mind? At the dinner table, in addition to the old cook's remark, at most millet grains hurriedly put down the bowls and chopsticks, applauding quickly but silently. According to the subtle knowledge in her secret book, this is called silence is better than sound at this time. But the rest of the people at the dinner table didn't speak. Probably on the way to school, a certain mud-legged man who held a hatchet and often fished was so heartbroken that after so many years, he was still entangled in this matter. As for why Luopao Mountain is well aware of this matter, everyone pretends to be ignorant. They never talk to each other at the table and they all have a tacit understanding. Of course, it is the result of millet grains fighting for the good man mountain master. For example, if she stayed in the back mountain with the old cook who taught boxing, the millet grains would be worth 300 taels of silver here, saying that my family is a good man, the master of the mountain, and his craftsmanship is no worse than that of the old cook. Then Chao Yin and Chao Yang immediately understood, probably Mr. Qin is good in everything but his craftsmanship is very average. Qin Pingan was obviously unwilling to Xiego to continue to talk about this and said, Fellow Taoist Changxing, you can introduce the current situation of the blessed land to Zhujiu. Zhang Lu Changming nodded and explained with a smile, Zhujiu, now we are here. Lotus Root blessed land, although it is a high-grade rank that has reached the bottleneck, and the rank has reached the point where it cannot be improved, but the number of chi practitioners is still very small, and the whole world can only be used as a rough estimate for the time being. It's only 100, and they are still more cautious when they look at the matter of traveling through the mountains and rivers in the clouds and fog. Like the earth immortals in the vast world, it is actually a very casual thing to travel far, but Gao Jun is the first in the blessed land. A Jindan cultivator, she regarded it as a daunting path and never dared to try it lightly, so she went out to practice this time, and borrowed a lot of Taoism books and secret books from Piyun Mountain. The head of Xingao has benefited a lot, and he returned to the Hushan school to cultivate the hidden spirit, and the practice would be faster. Xiego sneered and said, the frog at the bottom of the well is like the sun when it sees the light. Changxing ignored Xie Zix's interjection and continued to introduce the local customs to Guizhuzhou. The former needs to be busy figuring out how to use the incense of the common people to quench the divine power of the golden body, and it is inconvenient to leave the landscape jurisdiction without authorization. There are already many orthodox gods who have been sanctified by the imperial court, committing the taboo that the mountains and rivers clash, causing the golden body to suffer damage. The gods, Narcissus, ghosts and Yin spirits also do not dare to sway the world. The wind is everywhere in the sky and the earth. Every time the weather is full of thunder and lightning, it is a more difficulty for them. Xiego let out a sigh of disdain. The second seat is enshrined and it is similar to the law of Yishan, and the official position is similar. When Xiaomo and I practiced in ancient times before we became Earth Immortals, it wouldn't be a problem if we didn't meet from a certain department in the Thunder Department of the Heavenly Court. Zhang Lu Changming pointed to a mountain and river. Because the Hu Kingdom has set up a layer of landscape restrictions, there are not many natives of the Blessed Land who know about this fat cave. A fox country has taken root here, so as the lord of the fox country, Pei Xiang, has enough qualifications to join Gao Jun, Zhong Qian, and a few of them as local snakes, to participate in the mountaintop discussions in the world. As the well-deserved number one person in the world, Gao Jun is the initiator of this discussion. It is true that only she can bring together the heroes from all walks of life. Not only is she the first golden elixir in this world, but also because of this contemporary head of the Hushan school, she has traveled far and wide and has a gentle personality. Otherwise, replace it with someone else. It is said that such a meeting is to be held, but this person has the highest realm. If his behavior is similar to that of Ding Ying, how can we discuss the matter? Who doesn't worry about being blamed? Yu Jini, the head of the previous Hushan sect, was the first native, immortal, who practiced Taoism in a strict sense in the history of Blessed Land. After Yu Zhenyi's ascension, whoever can become the latest number one person in the world, someone who believes that he is bound to win, is the supreme emperor of Nanyuan Kingdom, Wei Liang, who took the initiative to take the throne. It is a pity that Wei Liang has been stagnant at the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate realm in recent years, and he has retreated twice, but he has not succeeded in one fell swoop and cannot become the first golden elixir of the blessed land. Step by step slowly, what is lacking is not only because Wei Liang is too late to practice Taoism, and he only climbed the mountain to practice immortality at the age of Jiazi, but more importantly, it is the right time and place. Unlike the lofty head of Gao, Zhong Qian is actually reluctant to mess with this kind of thing, and prefers to stay at Luopao Mountain to order food. Xiaomi, who served as the right guardian of Luopao Mountain, was very warm-hearted. He helped Zhong Qian to ask for a recipe from the old cook. Every time he ordered, he had a purpose. This blessed land's first golden-bodied martial artist really has no ambitions. In the days of eating and drinking in Luopao Mountain, what he exudes every day is not the martial arts spirit or the grandmaster's bearing, but every day he goes out to meet people, as if his forehead is on his forehead. I'll stick a note with a sentence on it, "Don't support me, I will be very comfortable lying down." A large group of bigwigs from the Shangzong visited the dojo in person. On the side of Hu Kingdom, Pei Xiang personally opened the door to entertain guests, and the talisman boat would land in a quiet courtyard in Pei Xiang. Pei Xiang hung a big red lantern secretly made by the Fox Kingdom in the courtyard. At this moment, among the outsiders of Luopao Mountain in the courtyard, there are only two of Paixiang's most highly regarded direct disciples. They are still young and have not yet formed pills, but they are all well qualified. They can be regarded as outstanding cultivators in the country. She can't learn the kind of high-spiritedness of the Lord of the Mountain. As the Lord of the Fox Country and the only nascent soul realm, she likes to pinch the tip the most, and accepts the young fox charm who has the most hope of becoming an earth immortal in the Fox Country as a named disciple. For the airs regarding the disciple's preaching, whether she can do her best, whether she will mislead others, whether it is the best arrangement for her own Fox Country, Pei Xiang doesn't care about these anyway. She will put it into her own hands first. It was fortunate that Pei Xiang was brought to meet the legendary sword Immortal Mountain Master. The two disciples were obviously very nervous. They both had the graceful appearance of young women, one bit her lip, and her chest was originally a landscape of rolling hills. Like water ripples, a young girl was clutching at the corner of her clothes. If it wasn't for a robe given by the master herself, she would probably have torn it apart. No wonder they were so at a loss. They only said that Shizhuan Pei Xiang earlier. She arrived at Luopao Mountain not nervous? Pei Xiang said with a smile, "Don't be so nervous. In the eyes of others you are a little girl. A woman of the same beauty, no matter how good Xiaojia Bu is, can she be more beautiful than everyone else?" The more plump disciple, she said with a bitter face, "Master, I'm afraid." Because she had heard a horrifying rumor that when Qin Jianxian was alone at the top of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, during the period, a wild fox fairy in the Jade Pure realm passed by the city. It is said that she was just on the way to ride the wind. She looked down at the last hidden official with a very bad temper and a strong murderous intention, and was dragged by the sword fairy. If he dragged him to the top of the city, if an ordinary man succeeded in winning a fox immortal in the upper 5 realms, not to mention Lian Xiangxiu as a maid in the house, even if he wanted to kill him. Before not? But just because it fell into the hands of the last hidden official, the fox fairy was torn apart by Qin Pingan on the spot. The corpses fell to the ground. The most terrifying thing is that there are still some monks in the Fox Country. They are as if they saw it with their own eyes, saying that the young hidden official who was in the city at the time, pulled out the head of the fox fairy, held it in his hand and stood in a pool of blood. Chewing on the fox fairy head, make a bowl with one hand, drink blood to make wine. Pei Xiang said with a smile, "Don't believe these rumors, they are all rumors. Our Lord Qinshan is actually a handsome gentleman. You can see, you will know what is Mr. Gentle and handsome gentleman like jade sword like a rainbow." No wonder the disciples were so frightened, not talking about them but only talking about Lu Shilia's student, Zheng Yuqian, who was born in Tongyi's Hao, who was brought by Lu Shirlu to meet his little Shirshu before meeting the little Shirshu. Deathly? Even before meeting Qin Pingan, Zheng Yuqian even had to go around and ask Lu Shirlu, "Master, your relationship with that little uncle is all right, right?" The other slender girl who was clutching the corners of her clothes tightly and with white veins protruding on the backs of her hands, said in a trembling voice, "Master, it would be nice to have you and senior sister to treat guests. I want to go back to practice Qi and do my homework. We cultivators 1 inch of time. An inch of gold. Don't worry, master, I will definitely cultivate well in the future." Regarding cultivation, the girl, because of her natural talent, also cherishes the blessing of being a disciple of Pei Xiang, the king of the country. Pei Xiang didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard the words. It scared you. When he saw Shanju Chen later, seeing is believing, he will know how deep your misunderstanding is. The other female cultivator glared at the junior sister, who was a friend who died. A Taoist is not a poor Taoist, stretched out 2 fingers and gently twisted the sleeve of the master. Master, how beautiful the junior sister is. I feel pity for it, she is so charming. Well, Qin Shanju saw it. Where? If you don't like it, you won't hate it. I can't do it. Anyone who sees it will scold a vixen, but don't let Qin Shanju get in the way. Pei Xiang laughed angrily. Tu Meizi, are you still talking about friendship? But in fact, those sensational gossip rumors are widely circulated. Pei Xiang is credited with it. Coupled with the secret help of several direct disciples, Chen Yingguan, who has never set foot in the Fox Country, is more than a fierce name. Those higher-level Qi practitioners in the Fox Country are familiar with the customs of Aquarius, so they can say that the truth is definitely not that exaggerated. But the younger Fox charm is, the more serious it is, so much so that they say that Chen Yingguan, who hates Yaozu Qi practitioners the most, as long as he enters our Fox Country, his appetite will be widened and his stomach will be hungry. All the way to walk, all the way to eat, all the way to drink. No matter who gets hit, who suffers, you can think about how to give birth to a good child in your next life. Pei Xiang likes to occasionally talk about what kind of feat that Qin Jianxian has done when he is holding a discussion at the Zhu Shirtang in the Fox Country. It was she who deliberately beat the hoofs of some unpopular foxes. Over the years, they have always liked to complain on the side of Pei Xiang that the Fox Country closed the mountain, and the life was too hard. Patriarch Pei Xiang, what did that Master Qin think? The mountain has been closed and the ban has been lifted. The disciples and grandchildren of our Fox Country have a high realm, they are in the middle 5 realms, and they are in the earth immortals, but they all shed their old skins once. Opportunity, according to the old rules of the Fox Country, it was just a change of the Su family in Qingfeng City, and the fox skin was supplied to Luopao Mountain as a tribute. Chen Jianxian took it to refine the fox skin talisman and sold it. Our Fox Country has done a filial piety. Luopa Mountain can use this to supplement some households. Isn't it the best of both worlds? Why is it necessary to seal the mountain like this, and the 2 sides are delayed? Everyone likes to insinuate when they talk, and there are needles hidden in the cotton. Don't talk about being close to the Jilling Peak Patriarch's Hall, you sharp-toothed mother-in-law. As long as you reach Luopao Mountain and stand firm, no matter who you talk to without trembling, even if you are daring. The talisman boat fell to the ground. Pei Xiang let out a sigh. This Qin Shanju is too polite. Because the talisman boat did not fall directly into this courtyard, but chose to settle outside the gate of Bai. Pei Xiang told the 2 disciples not to think about running away and lose her face as a master. She shrank the ley lines in 1 step and came to the door. Pei Xiang gave a blessing and a polite greeting. She then led the group of monks led by Qin Shanju into the mansion. Pei Xiang was worried. The 2 direct brothers, the son lost his temper and asked Qin Shanju and the others to see a joke, so he helped them explain a few words, why the disciple was so surprised. Qin Pingan rubbed his brows and said nothing. The peach blossoms on the roadside are shades of red, always lazy and in the spring breeze. Near the courtyard where the lanterns are hung, there is a passage between the rockeries. The highest points of the rockery on both sides are facing each other like a girl's double bat, both of which are like snails. Both sides of the road and the top of the mountain are planted with lotus, peony, and flowers and leaves are climbing. Mountain slope. Tourists look at this scene like a female hairpin from a distance. The sky and the earth and the spiritual energy are rich in water transport with ripples. People walk through the road, look up at the top of the head, the lotus pavilion, and the sky. We passed the arched moon-shaped flower gate of the overhanging Magpie Bridge together, and entered the elegant courtyard. Because I often go to Luopao Mountain as a guest, I know the preference of Qin Shanju. Pei Xiang had already prepared a few bamboo chairs and placed them under the eaves. Between the bamboo chairs, a flower table was placed, and the tea, snacks and candied fruits that had been prepared earlier were placed there. When it comes to entertaining the distinguished guests of Luopao Mountain, Hugua has achieved the friendship of the landlord, but it is actually very worry-free and labor-saving. Pei Xiang doesn't have to spend a lot of time and trouble. Finally, I saw the green-robed sword immortal who was not too young but not too old. The 2 disciples of Pei Xiang were already standing at the foot of the courtyard, giving them 1,000 blessings. Those 2 pairs of long eyes in the autumn waters had a very tacit understanding, and their eyes floated to one side, and they dared not look directly at the young hidden official who was said to kill demons as food, the Lord Qin Shan of Luopa Mountain. Qin Pingan just smiled and returned the salute. Since he said too many mistakes, he simply didn't say it. Similar losses. Qin Shanzhu suffered once at Xuanhuan in his early years. After taking their seats, Pei Xiang picked up her painting pole on top of the flower table. She looked at Shanzhu Qin and Qin Pingan nodded. In the courtyard under the stairs in the dusk sky, there is a huge picture of the landscape of the blessed land. The mountains are rolling, the rivers meandering, the states and counties of various countries, the mountains and rivers, the sects of the immortals, and the temples of the gods are all marked out in detail. The text hangs in the air like the sunrise. If the realm is not enough, the eyesight is not good, and if you want to see the landscape of a certain place clearly, Pei Xiang can point the country, with the drawing stick in his hand, and expand the landscape of a certain place 100 times and 1,000 times. Qin Pingan first peeled off a citrus and handed it to Guizhuzhou beside him, and reported several place names and people's names. Pei Xiang pointed to the corresponding sects and dojos with the drawing stick in his hand, among which was a place of Longxing of the Wei clan in Nanyuan Kingdom. As Qin Pingan had expected at that time when Gao Jun formed a golden pill, the first Qi trainer who noticed the vision of heaven and earth was Wei Liang, who opened a dojo in a place rich in dragon energy. Wei Liang was furious at the time, his mind was unstable and he almost went into trouble. Luapa Mountain once gave Wei Liang a stone letter containing 3 volumes of Taoism, but according to the agreement, Luapa Mountain can only guarantee to help Wei Liang to enter the 5th realm. Because Wei Liang also has the identity of the Supreme Emperor, the Nanyuan court has been secretly supporting and winning over the Wuxia Mountain Lord and the righteous gods of various rivers in the past few years, hoping to check and balance the Qi practitioners headed by the Hushan faction. Qin Pingan said, "People have different hearts, different paths, and they are all used to walking the old way." Chang Xing nodded and said, "Wei Liang, who was an emperor, has become a Qi practitioner after climbing the mountain and cultivating the Tao, but he can never leave the world behind. Identity, doing anything, I like to subconsciously rely on the temple and military strategy. It's not that it's impossible, but it's too much. If we don't draw a clear line, it's still difficult for Wei Liang to form a local immortal." On the other hand, Gao Jun, although she also has the identity of the head of the Hushan school, her Taoism and spirit are indeed higher than Wei Liang's. One chip. In the past, there were 10 people in the world in the blessed land. Among them, Zhongqiu followed the sound of the drum and climbed to the top of the city, and got a picture of the true shape of the 5 mountains, which is the real origin of the 5 mountains in the world today. In addition, the 4 countries of the blessed land have their own monarchs. Abbotseal, the 5 great mountains of Zen are divided into 5 great and small mountains. Lotus Flower Blessed Land has changed from a lower-class blessed land to a Lotus Root Blessed Land, and has been promoted to a superior blessed land. The biggest change is that the spiritual energy between heaven and earth has changed from being almost barren to extremely abundant. Only talk about the world's ancestral temples, each the righteous gods of mountains and rivers, which are enshrined by the imperial court, the ancestral temples dedicated to civil, military, and heroic spirits, and those lewd temples where the folks do their own sacrifices and where mountain spirits occupy a place to manifest their spirits, have given birth to a temple of incense and fire gods, as many as 100 temples. In addition to the changes in spiritual energy, the blessing of martial arts also skyrocketed. However, because the Lotus Flower Blessed Land was divided into 4 parts by the old Guanzhou, the mountains and rivers faded like a line drawing. For example, Qing Yuanshan and Tang Tie, the older generation of jianghu masters, became incomplete, so whether it was a practice, the martial arts realm was low back then. The Hushan faction, Gao Jun, was a blessing in disguise. The boat was small and turned around, and it was still a way to practice martial arts. Instead, Zhong Qian, a young warrior of the northern Jin dynasty, took the lead and became the first warrior in the golden body. Furthermore, Qing Yuanshan and Tang Tie, compared with the ascent of martial arts and the prosperity and wealth in the world, in fact, they are no match for the temptation of proving the Tao and living forever. The gods of the land live in the world, and they can live together with the sun and the moon. The members of the blessed land who are eligible to be invited to participate in the discussion include the Douyu Shanjun. As for the small Wuyue in the Shirgua territory, because Gao Jun has invited the emperors and monarchs of the Shirgua, these 20 mountain monarchs have not received the Hushan faction invitation. On the contrary, Jiangshui Jingxin, Hujuan and some mountain gods who had never taken refuge with a certain surname were able to attend the discussions. The seating arrangement that Pei Xiang had envisioned was that Shanzhu Chen would sit in the middle. As the lord of the Fox country, he belonged to accompanying, and Luopeishan Zhanglu Changming sat beside Qin Shanzhu, and then the direct disciple of Qin Shanzhu. Gua Bamboo Wine. Again it was the sable-capped girl who was in the evening mountain. As for Paixiang's own two direct disciples, of course, they were sitting on Paixiang's side. In this way Qin Pingan just sat in the middle. Except for Qin Shanju there are women on both sides. I just never thought that Zhang Lv Long Life would directly give up his seat to Guizhuzhou. Then the girl in the sable hat, who Peixiang still doesn't know the details of, is even more out of character. She pressed the handle of the chair with both hands, shook her shoulders, took the chair back one after another, then turned around and wandered in the corridor by the inner door and window. Walking, he just wandered all the way to the seat of Paixiang's disciple and sit down, taking care of his own emotions or copying a sentence from the book Mountain, Moving the Mountain. Cultivation of the Tao is hard, it is really tiring, clouds and rain bury the mountain, the tide of the storm, don't be the way of the world difficult. The female cultivator of the Fox clan nodded dazedly. After all, she is an unattainable immortal master of the upper sect, and the girl can still follow Qin Yingwen's side. The sable-cap girl slapped her fist with a fist. Unexpectedly, we are still the same people. I dare to ask this sister, what realm and how old are you? The fox charm answered honestly, the age of 19 is the bottleneck of the view of the sea. Her voice was not too loud, and the word bottleneck at the end was even more delicately spoken by the girl. After saying these two words, the ashamed girl looked down at the ground. The sable-cap girl was full of surprise. Oh, my sister is less than 20 years old and is a fairy in the 5th realm. It is no wonder that I can become the direct disciple of Peixiang Patriarch. I'm lucky to meet. My name is Xiego, my Taoist name is Plum Blossom. It happened a few days ago that I became a genealogy cultivator of Luopao Mountain. This is because my Taoist companion has a good relationship with Qin Shanju. It is considered that I have passed away relatives and I have an identity. My own realm is not high, but it is true it's been stagnant for too many years, so I will sigh that it is difficult to travel even if you don't complain. As soon as the girl who may heard about the Taoist name Plum Blossom, the girl whose surname was Xia but didn't know what to call it, she couldn't be that dog anyway. She was also a newcomer who had just become a monk of Luopao Mountain, and she claimed to be low in realm. The girl suddenly felt relieved and said secretly in her heart, Xianxia, my name is Chiu Qin, Chiu of the Hills, the minister of the general minister. I haven't decided on the Taoist name because I heard the Taoism of all the cultivators in the world. The number needs to be reported to and approved by the Confucian Academy outside. It is really difficult to choose a Taoist number that sounds good, is satisfactory, and can be described by the master as a Qi Dao. It's hard, I've been dragging it all the time. By the way, my name is Xiaoxuan, Xianxia, you can just call me by my nickname. In fact, Peixiang nicknamed this disciple who loved to laugh since he was a child, Armpit. Xianxia, the one sitting next to me, is my senior sister. Her name is Luo Fume, and her Taoist name is Yu Diao. Senior sister's cultivation qualifications are very good. Before she is 30 years old, she is already in the Dragon Gate realm. Senior sister will definitely be able to form a golden pill in the future. On my side, master never says anything like that and he is too lazy to lie to me. Senior sister also has a nickname, but she doesn't like people calling her like that. It's called Ugly Newer. In fact, the senior sister is so good looking, but I don't know the teacher. What did my father think? He wanted to call her like that, but I usually wouldn't dare. Xiego was a little caught off guard. The little girl's family, you can really talk. In today's world, are the fox cubs who were passed down by that saucy auntie so unsuspecting? In the ancient days when the rules were not strict and Qi practitioners could do whatever they wanted, on the earth, several human dynasties and demon kingdoms in the early secular sense were all ruined by that sassy fox. She was almost in the 14th realm by this, only one step away, and then the little master who couldn't stand it took Mr. Bai to go to her to talk together. She seemed to get the news in advance, and she didn't dare to. When I saw that little master, I didn't know where did Dao. The most powerful thing about this woman is that she can deceive people and kill both men and women. In the eyes of Taoist priests and scholars in the past, many ancient earth immortals who could have reached higher places on the road have been murdered by her one after another. As for the earth immortals who are in the gentle village, the heroes are sad. Beauty is off. Anyway, in the end they all died in the bright red skirt painted with peonies and pomegranate flowers. Remember that she was outside the old nest. The second dojo seems to be in a place called Miji? It's near the Wooding River, one of the tributaries of the Savage Dragging River. It's a pity that it's all an old yellow calendar. Xiego originally thought that among the fellow Taoists who woke up this time, there would be this former co-owner of the Fox clan in the world, but unfortunately when they gathered at the riverside, Xiego never saw her figure. As for why Xiego misses the other party so much, of course he is thinking, hacking her to death so that he can two Dao names that Bai Jing coveted for a long time. the hook stealer, and bad water. Besides, this stinky and shameless auntie, when she had just become an earth immortal, she blocked the road, scratched her head and made gestures, and spread her foxtails to cover the sky. She actually wanted to sleep herself. Don't think that Bai Jing's so many Taoist numbers are all chosen by her. Qin Pingan asked, Pei Xiang about the Daoyue Shanjin's roots? Have you checked it out? In this matter, Luo Peishan did not do it personally, but asked Pei Xiang and Hugua to help in investigating the details and gathering intelligence. In fact, it is not wrong to say that doing this is superfluous. Not to mention today's lotus root blessed land, even if Luopao Mountain will close the blessed land for 1,000 years, let a high-quality blessed land flourish and then open the door and then assume that, the whole world led by Gao Jun, a large number of land will emerge. Fairyland, come and fight with today's Luopao Mountain, and the outcome is definitely still without suspense. I am afraid that the only suspense is that a few swordsmen and warriors are dispatched from Luopa Mountain. Pei Xiang nodded and took out a booklet from his sleeve. In addition to the mountain lords of the 5 great mountains in the world, the gods of the mountains and rivers that have been sealed by the various imperial courts, and those who are prosperous in the folk incense temples, Shanzi Yeshio who stands out, more promising I have recorded all the ghosts and spirits who have entered the middle 5 realms. In fact, our Fox country secretly dispatched 9 middle 5 realm cultivators, who are specially responsible for tracking them. Qin Pingan took the not-so-thin booklet and said with a smile, Is there no credit for respecting the building here? Pei Xiang said with a face, I know that I can't hide it from the mountain master. Qin Pingan turned to the first page and there was actually a preface, which included the cooperation between the Hu Kingdom and the Admiration Building. Qin Pingan raised his head and glanced at Pei Xiang, turned to the second page. It was the Great and Small 5 Sacred Mountains. He didn't rush to browse the content and flipped a few pages casually. The second one was the Emperor and General's pictures. Read the summary at the beginning of the chapter in the content. The first 4 are Wei Yan, Emperor of Nanyuan State, Tang Tie of Northern Jin State, and the young monarch of Songlai State, and Tuoba clan, the lord of the grassland in the north, who was turned over by Qin Pingan. Arrived. The beauty of the world. Unexpectedly there are also illustrations of flower and bird-colored paper bottoms and meticulously painted women's portraits. Just a glimpse, Qin Pingan saw a beautiful woman in a long monochrome silk satin dress, sitting on an embroidered pier, showing her face sideways. She was holding a book under the flowers, and there seemed to be a poem written in the blank of the portrait. What impressed Qin Ping the most it is still the little finger of the woman who twists the pages of a book, wearing a long armor, and it is full of brilliance not like a common thing. It is estimated that there will be chapter titles such as the chapters on the strange gods, the immortals refining the qi and the martial arts chapters. Qin Pingan turned back to the second page and seemed to say to himself, Julien doesn't know what to teach. Learning? Pei Xiang sneered again. Let Hugua cooperate with Jin Jianglu, clearly write the main line of the story in the preface, and the classification of the main text and chapters etc., are indeed Julien's suggestions. Qiu Qing whispered to the meeting girl Xie, and pricked up her ears, listening to the content of the young secret official's words and the voice of the man in the blue shirt. Hey, it's not the murderous, mellow voice she had in her impression at all, and she spoke quite nicely. As for Luo Fume, she put all her thoughts on Qin Jiangxian's side. She was afraid that the other party would dislike the taste of tea and preserved fruit, so she suddenly said, additional meal, wanting to eat some meat with thin skin and tender meat. Taste. Comparable junior sister is closer to him. Furthermore, she was more curious about how such a big man so far away would be, how to chat with people. There are days outside the sky and there are people above people. Qin Pingan looked up at a part of the sky, and began to reach out and rub his temples. Changming said in a heartfelt voice, it seems that they have changed their minds temporarily. They don't plan to come to the Fox country for the time being. Qin Pingan nodded and said, let them go. It turned out that Julien temporarily opened the gate of Jisa Peak in Luopao Mountain, allowing 2 outsiders from Luopao Mountain to enter the Lotus Root blessed land. As the big housekeeper, Julien didn't even say hello to the mountain owner beforehand and afterwards. This is not a common move. Julien personally led the way, and the 2 outsiders took the talisman boat to the boundary of Nanyuan. Xiego glanced over there and looked away. She asked curiously in her heart, Shanju, who is it so arrogant you don't even say hello to us? I can only say that I am now the second seat of Luopao Mountain. The next time I participate in the discussion of Jiaisfeng Patriarch Hall, I will be the high official seated in the front row. Qin Pingan smiled and said, friend. Changming explained with a smile, it's the current suzerain of Longquan sword sect, Lu Xianyang. There is also Mr. Zheng's direct disciple of Beta Sheng Gu Kan. They are all friends of the son's hometown and play together until the end. Xiego nodded, no wonder. No matter how good a friend is, he is a guest of Luapa Mountain after all. Why didn't Mr. Zhu say a word to our mountain master? Longevity had to continue to explain. Qin Pingan felt a little guilty. Longevity, if Lu Xianyang is here, what he has done next will be counted on my head. Anyway, he will follow his own rules. Xiego Tskdite, before the mountain master you were a long-lived Taoist, why don't you add the suffix now and don't call the applause? Changming squinted his eyes and smiled and said softly, Shanju, I only know that Zhu Lian has arrived at the blessed land, and I don't know if there are outsiders trespassing here. Xiego continued to tut-tut, ouch, it's sour. Don't call the sun or the mountain master, it's not a fake public service. Zhu Lian drove a talisman boat to the capital of Nanyuan Kingdom. Gukan sneered in his heart, you don't see the outside world. What are you doing with Chen Pingan so out of touch? Gukan said nothing. I have never met him. Lu Xianyang deliberately sprinkled salt on his wound and said with a smile, can this be the same? You are Qin Ping's follower, he is mine. Gukan twitched the corners of his mouth. Followers, that's a good idea, you're just an ass. Lu Xianyang stretched out a palm. Slug, sniff it quickly to see if my fart smells like shit. Gukan knocked off Lu Xianyang's arm. Zhu Lian smiled. If it was just Gukan who said that he wanted to enter the lotus flower blessed land, of course there would be no problem, but Zhu Lian would definitely let him know. But since Gukan still has Lu Xianyang beside him, he can avoid it. If there is anyone else in the world who can make his young master not fight back and scold him, I am afraid that apart from the mountain master's wife, there is only this Lu Xianyang. Zhu Lian rarely thinks how lucky his son is. Only because he knew Lu Xianyang early, Zhu Lian sincerely felt that his son was lucky. Even Zhu Lian would feel that without anyone, the son would still be the son he is today. Only when he was a teenager without Lu Xianyang in his life, it would be very difficult for him to have a son. Today's achievement. Before coming to Luopao Mountain, Gukan did not go to the Yui Peak of Longquan Jianzong, but settled down in the old Baiwe land. When the two women went shopping at Xianjiaduku, they found a restaurant and had a drink. Each left the daughter-in-law and the maid next to him. Lu Xianyang said that there was a temporary emergency, while Gukan asked the maid to accompany Miss Yu. At the wine table, Lu Xianyang's eyes were filled with resentment and self-pity, saying that Gukan, my brother, is about to get married, and he has never drunk flower wine once. Short after a few days, the banquet is set, and I become a relative and have a daughter-in-law. With my character, of course, I have to be more attentive. Gukan said nothing, just drinking. Lu Xianyang continued to pour the bitter water, saying that the flowers passed through the bushes, and the leaves did not touch the body, but my heart is bitter. You are different from you and Qin Pingan. You are in Yin Yanyan's book Jianghu Qingsha Island, a young age. I've seen the big world. Qin Pingan is in the arena, and he doesn't say anything about being in the pink team, cuddling with red Itsue fairies and heroines. Have you seen less? Worst of all, I've always met some charismatic ghosts. Let's take a look at us. People are more popular than dead people. As soon as they go out, they will study abroad across continents. When I went to the Confucian Qin family, who was known as the Master of the Archway, I came into contact with books of sages and sages every day, or the gentlemen and sages full of righteousness. I didn't know what the so-called flowers in the world were. Gukan was so annoyed that she said that if I invite you to the brothel, I should invite you to drink flower wine, or drink flower wine directly in the brothel. You pick one. Just go. The two of them went straight to Luopao Mountain. When drinking flower wine, you can't find a rich man and take advantage of it. To pit outsiders is not to talk about the morality of the rivers and lakes, but to pit one's own friends. As long as there is the slightest psychological burden, it is considered that our sect Master Lu did not regard each other as a friend. Qin Pingan slowly said, tomorrow's Autumn Chi Lake discussion, we have two main things here on Luopao Mountain. We need to be open and honest with Gao Jun and the others. First of all, we must set a few rules for the mountain, and at the same time for this world, drawing up landscapes and common customs and dim boundaries. As for the specific content, I will talk about it in detail when they have finished talking about it tomorrow. Second, help the courts of various countries to build Qin Tianjian and teach Wang Qi. Speaking of which, Qin Pingan picked up the teacup above the flower table, which is an expensive utensil of the fairy family, took a sip of tea and held the tea in his hand. Jean, there is no wall in the world that does not leak the wind, and the imperial court who has obtained the Qi technique will definitely leak it out. It's just a matter of time. I believe that the various landscape gods will soon master this magical power. They know it and the whole world will know it, but the threshold of this technique is high, but there is no need to worry about the flooding of the world. Seeing that the mountain master no longer spoke, Zhang Lu Changming helped to explain. As long as the Qi practitioners and pure martial arts masters are higher, it is easier for them to be found by the Qin Tian supervisor Qi practitioners and gods. Of course, Qi practitioners will definitely study the corresponding hidden. There are various spells of the Qi shielding machine, but as long as they fight in a certain place, the more severe the spells and means of the Qi practitioners, and the higher the fists displayed by the martial artist, the more difficult it is for the two to cover up the traces. For example, the Hushan school has 16 Qi practitioners. Among them, 2 of them are deeply hidden. If it wasn't for Qin Pingan's visit to the Hushan school at that time, he would have been in the dark. Here, the 2 Qi trainers who are hidden and tucked away are the 2 secret chests that Eugenie left to the Hushan faction, among them Qing Yuanshan, who was one of the 10 people in the world in the past. Therefore, whether it is the number of Qi trainers or the average realm, the Hushan faction is well deserved the world leader. And a Qi trainer like Qing Yuanshan who wants to gain great freedom, must not want a hopeful person to appear in the world. The Mountain Lord's move is not to prevent all kinds of personal hatreds on the mountain, but to prevent Qi trainers and martial arts masters from intervening too much in the battlefield and killing people too unscrupulously. Moving mountains and seas at will, with spells like rain, wanton smashing on the battlefield where armored soldiers gather, causing countless casualties, or outside the battlefield, using mysterious magical powers to create various methods that seem to be natural disasters but are actually man-made disasters such as plague, severe droughts, floods, etc. In the future there will be more and more martial arts masters who will enter the 3 realms of refining gods. They will be enemies in the battlefield. Fleeing off the battlefield to commit crimes, he sneaked into the important towns of Dazhou and xuanhuan, the capital of other countries, and arbitrarily beheaded the monarchs and generals of the enemy countries. After he succeeded, he walked away quietly. So the courts of various countries have a Qin Tianjian who is proficient in Wangqi, and they can carry out targeted prevention and layout of these hidden dangers. Even if they cannot be stopped at the time, they can also pursue and take revenge afterwards. Even on the battlefield where the 2 armies face off against each other, a kind of exchange similar to duezy can be carried out, each relying on the national strength and back end and each other's hands. Of course, even so, there is still no way to completely eliminate the one-sided battle with disparity in killing power, but at least it can make the Qi trainer who regards armored men like ants, and the martial arts master who claims to be invincible, have to be vigilant, remind yourself not to capsize in the gutter, and accidentally become a hero who hides behind the scenes and disappears. The head rolled to the ground. Pei Xiang carefully mulled over his words and prepared the draft, and then asked softly, Shanzhu Zhanglu, the restrictions on the cultivation of a country's monarch in Haoran Xianxia, do you want to copy it here in Fudi? Qin Pingan closed the booklet in his hand and said, I haven't thought about it yet. Turning his head to look at his disciple, Qin Pingan raised the booklet in his hand and asked with a smile, would you like to read it as a book? Next to him, Guizhuzhou raised his feet, his cloth shoes tapped lightly, and he quickly waved his hands when he heard Master's question. Qin Pingan put the booklet in his sleeve and was silent for a long time before suddenly asking, Pei Xiang, what do you think they think of us? Xiego had already sat cross-legged on the chair, his arms crossed his chest, and he laughed, extend your neck and look up at the sky. After all, it's just a blessed land. What about the top rank? It has to be the colorful world, preferably the Qingming world with a white jade capital. Xiego felt qualified to let the other party know that he was a sword cultivator. Guizhuzhou hesitated for a moment and asked, Master, are you nervous? Qin Pingan nodded, I'm a little nervous. Guizhuzhou asked, how about the first meeting of the Spring Festival House on Hanging Mountain? Qin Pingan smiled and said, I'm almost nervous. I'm nervous. In fact, everything is fine. Guizhuzhou patted Master's arm lightly with one hand, raised his fist with the other, and waved it vigorously. Master, don't be nervous, you are the most powerful person in the world. Qin Pingan squinted and smiled and nodded lightly, it makes sense. Pei Xiang didn't understand it at all, she didn't understand it, and her 2 disciples naturally couldn't understand it even more, and even began to be afraid, is this Qin Pingan planning to kill? Perceiving and guessing the state of mind of the 2 disciples, Pei Xiang got angry and reprimanded in his heart, don't think nonsense. Longevity squinted and smiled. The man beside him is worried that the living beings in this world are not doing well. Sword of Coming Chapter 1188. Chapter 1188 by Yeshur is invincible by also followed Lu Shirlu to Luopao Mountain, so he didn't move his nest. Even if Wei Bo personally invited him once, Bai didn't bother to say a polite word. He looked indifferent and just shook his head. Wei Shanjun, who was about to receive the divine title Night Tour, immediately left and did not dare to disturb the most proud practice in the world. Even if Mr. De, who knew that the head of the 10 philosophers in the Confucian temple, was now on the side of Piyun Mountain, Bai was still the mansion in the mountain. Sunrise over the East China Sea and sunset over the West Mountains. I don't know why Bai always met that strange little girl in black, but that little girl who was said to be the right protector of Luo Pashan, never got close to chat, just stood far away, slung a cotton bag across the body for the first time. Bai also said hello to Zhou Mi Li out of courtesy, and of course because of his friend Jun Qian's face. Bai couldn't just keep staring at a little girl like this and then squeezed out a smile. Seeing that she still didn't speak, Bai continued to admire the burning clouds in the sky. Listening to the sound of footsteps behind her, the little girl tiptoed away, and when she reached the Shinto steps she started to trot all the way, and then ran away when she got far. The second time I met the little girl it was the morning when the sky was white with fish belly, and Bai also arrived early and the little girl was a little late. Bai also turned around and asked with a smile, "Millet grains, is something wrong?" The little girl shook her head, scratched her face, and when Bai also turned around and stood by the railing, she ran away again. The third time Bai also turned his head to look, and saw that he was just sitting silently on the steps with little backs, and Bai became more and more confused. When it was the fourth time the little girl seemed to have deliberately detoured the long way, took a small road from Jiling Peak, first reached the back mountain of Jisa Peak, then climbed quickly, and then hid on the side of the old mountain shrine. There was no emergence from beginning to end, just squatting in place, never showed up on Bai Yi's side. When Bai Yi walked down the top of the mountain, she found that the little girl had bypassed the building, leaned the green bamboo stick and the golden pole against the railing, and then climbed up on the railing herself and started nibbling on the sunflower seeds by herself. Bai Yi, who was walking on the road, was completely stunned. Has he been kept by a little girl 4 times in succession? The problem is that until now he still doesn't know what the little girl wants to say or do. So that even Bai is so indifferent to everything, when he arrives at his residence in the mountains after hesitating, he has to go to the next house to ask his friend Jun Qian for advice, and ask Xiaomi why he did this. If the little girl wants to help someone ask for an authentic copybook or someone wants to ask for advice on swordsmanship, it doesn't really matter, after all she is a guest at Luopao Mountain. Jun Qian laughed heartily and helped her friend to solve the mystery. It turned out that he had told me before that my friend Bai Yi, you think the dried small fish that you tasted at the foot of the mountain once tasted very good, but you are thin-skinned. I'm embarrassed to ask Luo Pashan to ask for it. I feel like I've lost my share. In addition, you are withdrawn and not good at words. Usually you always look at everyone with a straight face. Frightened away with a cold face, let alone you, especially you don't want to owe anyone a favor. So, the little girl just got up her courage and pretended that every time she had a chance encounter with you Bai, she wanted to change her method and invite you to eat a small dried fish, that's all. Later, she was afraid of disturbing you to enjoy the scenery, so she moved to sit on the other side of the steps, and she didn't dare to see you for the last time. You don't feel good here. Thinking of the little girl in black, she frowned slightly, and when she turned her head to look, she pursed her lips and smiled, clutching the string of the cotton satchel. The eyes and face of the tiger-headed hat boy gradually softened. Lu Shirlu patted his friend's tiger hat and complained, Bai Yi, I always feel that everyone in the world wants something, this time you are ignorant. But the world is so strange. When Bai also wanted to wait for the rabbit, the little girl was just busy patrolling the mountain twice in the morning and evening, and then went to the door to chat with the Taoist Xianhui to relieve the boredom. Otherwise it is to go to the old cook's side to make a door, squatting aside and watching the old cook weave the dustpan. On time, I will go to the first floor of the bamboo building, accompanied by the good person Shanju who is reading and the sister Nuanshu who is busy with needlework. Xiaoli is just in charge of being in a daze, rolling around in the corridor and looking at the mountains. The white clouds outside came and went, and they gave them nicknames in their hearts. Today's second mountain tour is over and you're done. All you need to do is get a good night's sleep and wait for your good friend called tomorrow to come uninvited. Millet grains passed by Jisa Peak Shinto steps, slowed down, looked up at the top of the mountain, hesitated and hesitated, let it go. If you go there again you won't be sophisticated enough to do things. I can't say that Mr. Bai will be annoying in the future and will not be willing to go out to enjoy the scenery. Millet Grain carrying a small pole on his shoulders, holding a green bamboo stick, swaggering away, nothing but more happy than depressed. Depressed troops are too few, happy soldiers are strong and strong, a little depressed they have to lose and lose their armor and disarm, miserable, defeated like a mountain. After all, that is the legendary Mr. Bai. He used to have long hair and short knowledge, and he was ignorant. It seemed that it was time to borrow the passers-by from Jing Qing. It's just that I don't know why Mr. Bai is said to be the most proud in the world, and even the good man Mountain Master couldn't say why. Millet pondered for a while, then turned to look at the top of the mountain. A flash of inspiration came to her mind. She did not rush back to her house, but flew all the way to the foot of the mountain. She moved a chair and sat beside Taoist Xianhui. The chair was placed slightly sideways, so that she could see the movement on the top of the mountain with the corner of her eye. Every time Mr. Bai goes down the mountain, he is not in a hurry, so as long as he is full of energy he can walk fast, 3 steps and 2 steps, and it is estimated that he will happen to meet on the mountain road to the house. What a good strategy! I didn't read the military book in vain. What a good 36 strategies that I have learned and used now. Seamless, no traces. Xianhui noticed the strangeness and asked with a smile, "Right, Protector, what are you looking at?" The millet said with a sullen face, "What is it?" Xianhui was afraid that she would be bored sitting here, so he chatted with Xiaoli, who listened with interest, and when she regained her senses she quickly turned her head and looked at the Shinto mountain road. Too bad, only to see that Mr. Bai had already left. Going down the top of the mountain, the figure forked into the road leading to the mansion. The little girl wrinkled her nose and whispered aggrieved, "Xianhui Taoist, I'm wrong." Xianhui said nervously, "What do you say?" The little girl scratched her face and said with a smile, "It's my fault that I was distracted, but I can't blame Taoist Master Xianhui." Xianhui asked curiously, "Xiaomi, don't tell me, let me see if I can make up for 1 or 2? Xiaomi Meili stood up and said with a bright smile, "The green hills will not change and the green water will flow forever, Master Xianhui, see you tomorrow." Xianhui got up and asked, "Are you all right?" Millet Grain grinned, "What's the matter?" Millet Grain just ran out a few steps, stopped and turned to remind, "Xianhui Taoist, in the evening the light has dimmed, novel. Come, don't be too focused, pay more attention." Wei Xian said with a smile, "A cultivator, although I am only a layman with half a bucket of water for the time being, I don't need to care about this kind of thing anymore, but don't worry, I will definitely pay attention to it in the future." When they came to the top of the mountain, the little girl in black sighed and came to the railing. The short girl pressed her head against the railing and complained about herself. So many military books were read in vain. At this moment, a smiling voice sounded in my ear, "Xiaomi, what are you doing?" Millet Grain hurriedly stood up straight, blinked, it turned out to be Mr. Bai. She blushed a little, "Ha, just kidding," slapped the bull with the railing. Bai also rested on the railing with one hand, a little toes, sat on the railing, stretched out his hand, "Sit and talk together?" Millet Grain hurriedly put away the green bamboo stick and the golden pole, jumped on her own and sat on the railing, the little girl clutching the rope of the cotton satchel in front of her. Bai also deliberately didn't look at the little girl in black beside him, for fear that she would be too nervous to speak again. Just out of the corner of his eye, he could see Xiaomi Mi's expression and subtle movements at a glance. If she hadn't asked herself, Jun Qian would have answered. Bai may also never know that there was such a thought in the world. It seems dispensable, it seems that it is nothing to ignore. Just like Bai Yi likes to visit the immortals and the mountains in his life, he has been to many famous mountains and more unknown peaks, but there must be more famous mountains that have passed by. But at this moment, Bai Yi looked up, stretched out his hand to hold the tiger's hat, and only felt that the scenery in the twilight seemed to be good. One big and one small, sitting on the white jade railing together like this. "Millet, where is your hometown?" "My hometown is far away. It's the Baoxiang Kingdom in the north of the Huaihuang Kingdom in Beiju Luzhou. There is a place called Yaba Lake on the edge of Huangfeng Valley. It's a small place with small rice." Mr. Bai must have never heard of it. "That's going across continents. It's really not close. You're here in Luapa Mountain, will you miss your hometown?" "I think it's not very often, but when I think about it, I'll really think about it just occasionally. This is my home. I still think of my hometown. Half of the reason is because I was born and raised there and learned to shape my body. The other half of the reason is that I met the good man Mountain Master for the first time in Yaba Lake, and then there were immortal masters on the mountain who wanted to arrest me, but those immortal masters were not bad people, they wanted to invite me to be a little river woman." When Bai also heard the little girl say, "The immortal master arrests people," he narrowed his eyes for a while, but he soon heard the little girl say that they were not bad people, and Bai was relieved and his eyes returned to normal. It's just that I can't avoid doubts in my heart. Since the little girl said that she was arresting someone, why did she invite him later? The little girl's ideas and practices always seem to be so unrestrained. Speaking of this, the little girl couldn't help but smile, put her hands on the railing and shook her legs gently. The good man has a lot of money and spent 2 grain rain money to buy me and then let me stay in Duba Lake. I'm not happy, I just wanted to eat delicious and spicy food with him. In fact, I just wanted to leave Duba Lake, find a scholar, and ask him to help me write a story that I had agreed to a long time ago. Let's go to the rivers and lakes together. We traveled the mountains and rivers together. There are many stories and exciting. At that time I was standing in the basket carried by the good man mountain master like a fairy on the mountain. Bai Yi smiled and said, so it is. Knowing that I will miss my hometown, the good man Xianxia went to Beiju Luzhou to do business last time, so he specially brought me this oil tow bottle. When we crossed the sea with the wind, we even got on a strange night boat. Well, I encountered a lot of strange people and strange things, a long list, too many to count. Fortunately, our good man, the mountain master, has a lot of knowledge and we can't help him with any questions. Later we landed on the beach of bones and went all the way. I walked and I came to Dumb Lake. After I visited it once, I don't think so much now. I used to think that my Dumb Lake site was big, but it turned out to be small, but I still think about it. Anyway, I'm not in a hurry. After a few years or more, wait until the good person mountain master goes there to do business. Hey Mr. Bai, do you know my gossip can be well informed, and then I will tell the good person mountain master as soon as he said it, he would definitely take me. When the little girl said this, she was full of pride and shook her head. Xiaoli, your realm is not high, but you are in a high position in Luopao Mountain. Don't you feel wronged when you protect the mountain? What? Bai Yi smiled and said, it seems that Lord Qin has protected you very well. The little girl nodded vigorously and also gave a thumbs up to Bai. That's right. Bai Yi said, your senior brother Qi from Shanzhu Qin once went to see me once, and Qi Jingchen's general idea back then was probably to persuade me not to be so frustrated. Look at the world outside, don't always be trapped in the world I felt in my heart. I looked at it later and I didn't feel any difference at the time. That's all. Xiaomi Meili lowered her voice and said softly, the good man said we can't always tell ourselves that's it. The good man also said that this is not good. Bai Yi smiled and said, Master Qin Shan's idea is very good. The millet grains were in a good mood all of a sudden, and he treated people with sincerity and told the truth. Instead of being angry, Mr. Bai praised the good mountain master, happy. The elated little girl turned her head, put her hand to cover her mouth and said in a low voice, Mr. Bai, let me tell you a secret. Although the good mountain master has lost a battle with others, but as long as he drinks a lot, he is talented. It's amazing. Bai Yi smiled and asked, come and listen? Millet grains suddenly recovered. This is Mr. Bai who has written many poems. Is it inappropriate to talk about this? Fortunately, Mr. Bai is kind and understanding, and has already helped her out of the siege. Bai also smiled and said, I remember that I used to visit the immortals with Jun Qian to ask about the famous mountains and rivers, and I also met some Taoist priests in the mountains and experts from outside the world who met by chance. It's barely a fighting poem, but when they heard it, they didn't think much of it and the comments were not high. Anyway, there were problems everywhere. Either it didn't rhyme at all, or the rhyme was changed incorrectly, or the rhythm here and there were rhymes which was illegal and even Pingzhi doesn't understand. Millet exclaimed, are they ignorant or are they too good? Bai Yi smiled and said, maybe both. Millet grains said, anyway, the good mountain master said that only when you are really drunk can you read the spirit of Mr. Bai's poems. If you are not drunk, you can't. Bai Yi said, then you must have a very good amount of alcohol, Qin Shanzhu. I guess he is almost never drunk, right? Millet scratched her face. The good mountain master really didn't get too drunk. It's very rare, I know only a few times, but I wasn't there at the time, I just heard about it. White didn't care either. Obviously, no matter whether it is Qin Pingan in Luopao Mountain or the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he is not a scholar who will worship Bai Yi's poems at all. Jun Qian just stood quietly in the distance, with her back against the railing, her arms crossed over her chest. The main thing is to worry that Bai will not be enlightened, but don't say anything so stupid, it will make our millet cry. Bai also turned to look at him. Jun Qian motioned you to talk about you, don't worry about me. At the old school in the small town, Ma Zhan, the younger brother who had unraveled some of his knots, still refused to come to Luopao Mountain in the end. Jun Qian, a senior brother, and Qin Pingan, a young junior brother, did not force it. However, Ma Zhan's identity has changed, from one of the temple blessings of the Imperial Temple in the capital to a lecturer at the Dili Chunshan Academy. Ma Zhan didn't know the content of the discussion in the imperial study in the capital at the time, so he felt it was strange. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Brother Cui is the national teacher of Dali and so am I now. Jun Qian turned her head and smiled at the tiger-headed boy. It is right to go to Xuandu Temple to practice Taoism and practice swords, and it is also right to come to Luapa Mountain. Haoran is 3 unique, Bai Yesher is invincible, Jinxiu Chuiyu and swordsman Pei Min. My good friend Bai Yi who is devoted to the Tao has a vast immortal spirit, and his talents are prosperous and mighty, like the Milky Way pouring into the world and no one in the world can match. It is recognized that the world is the most proud, Bai Yi is indeed invincible in poetry, and the poetry of swordsmanship is in the sky. But the result is just like what Bai Yi himself said, the road is like the sky and I can't figure it out. His own husband also persuaded Bai Yi that it is rare for people to cultivate the Tao of words, and it is natural that he is not skilled. As for Jun Qian and Bai, they are also close friends, and the husband and Bai have always been in the same generation. According to what the husband said in private, they each have their own way. Of course, it doesn't matter if you really want to care about it. Jun Qian respected her teacher again, but when she heard the statement of her husband, Li Xian Corporal, she couldn't hold back her face and she didn't dare to refute anything. The old scholar stood on tiptoe and patted the disciple's shoulder, but don't think that the teacher is talking ill of Bai Yi behind his back. Jun Qian, I guess you forgot, the Taoist ancestor said something, and the corporal laughed when he heard it. In the husband's view, Bai Yi is clearly the material of the sergeant's knowledge, and he has reached the state of mind of a sergeant, but now he is a corporal, and this is the swordsmanship in realm. Steps. One day the heart will be connected with the heaven and the earth, and the heaven and man will be one, and then go up another step. Those immortals on the mountain praise people for their good future, and they always like to say that the great road can be expected. This statement is not tacky at all. Bai is also not a good road who can be a good road. But, speaking of which, the old scholar stomped his feet. Since he is a corporal who has already heard the word and is trapped by his own heart, then he will break the jar and smash it. Either I have seen it, I have walked through it, or it belongs to me. They all say that people who cultivate the Tao have no worries, never drag the water and stay away from the world's red dust. That's just the correct way of ordinary Qi practitioners, there's nothing wrong with that. But your friend, he is Bai Yi. How can you be so petty, seeing all the famous mountains walking through the world and being extremely disappointed, just like what Bai said, a time traveler temporarily rests in heaven and earth and stops for 1,000 years, isn't it still like a moment? Time, so I say, the Maja Juzi said it very well, if there is a university question, it is not without peace of mind, but I have no peace of mind. So, how can you be complacent when you have no peace of mind? It can only be that the higher the realm, the lonelier it is. Why does Bai Yi, except for a few confidants, say that he is the most proud in the world, but he himself feels frustrated? I've been traveling far away and I've seen too much, so I'm so disappointed, sir. Don't care about others, just say that he's alone, it's not right. Jun Qian felt that as long as it was the truth that her husband said, it must be right. I just want to tell these truths one by one to my friend Bai Yi. The old scholar shook his head, telling the students bluntly that it was useless to say it now. Who is Bai, how tenacious his Taoism is, not to mention what big truth he doesn't understand? These few words, sir, are as light as a feather, and they are not enough to tickle others. Jun Qian looked helpless. The old Xiaotsai said with a smile, but no nonsense, don't worry, in the future Bai will always have a moment of enlightenment, and then keep his share of Taoism and not retreat, it is enough. Jun Qian was relieved. The old Xiaotsai finally reminded the students, Jun Qian, Corporal Li Xian, don't mention it on Bai Yes' side, it's too unpleasant, it will easily hurt the brotherhood and you can't drink alcohol. At that time the old Xiaotsai walked away thinking about which friend on the mountain to ask for wine next time. There were too many friends and all of them were attentive. And let the future Bai also ask himself, when practicing swordsmanship to the extreme, what do I want? Bai also only needs to be determined, and the green lotus will bloom. The world is magnificent and I am white and I am the most proud of the world. Later when Sheng's line broke apart, and the old scholar was imprisoned in Gongdalan. When the world changed greatly, Bai also traveled to Fuyazu alone with his sword. And later, the boy with the tiger head hat stood under the pear blossoms, and was taken by the old scholar to the Xuandu temple of the Qingming world. According to her husband's instructions, Jun Qian must take Bai Yi to see and see more before Bai Yi enters the 5 realms, to go to the famous mountain dojo, and even more to the world. After entering the top 5 realms before ascending to the realm, you have to take Bai out a few times. Anyway, there is one purpose. You can't let Bai break through the realm too quickly and you can't let Bai go out alone. Just look at what he used to see. Landscape. The husband finally gave Jun Chen an analogy. The two of you, going out to see the scenery in the future will be like taking a trip to the world again. Personnel are reasonable. This study tour will touch the scenery and generate emotions all the way. Twist one or two truths as food and drink. Travel thousands of miles. Read thousands of books. Not only White will also gain, Jun Chen, you will also gain. Jun Chen leaned against the railing and looked at the boy in the tiger-headed hat and the little girl in black over there. Most of the girls were chatting non-stop, and Bai also said a few words from time to time. However, compared to Bai Yi who used to be alone, even Bai Yi who stayed by Jun Chen's side, Bai Yi's words today are still a lot more. At this moment, there was no more faint sadness in the eyes of the handsome young man. A child's heart, a childlike innocence and fun complement each other. They nibbled melon seeds and ate dried small fish together. Every time the millet heard Mr. Bai talking about something from that year, she would be stunned and startled. Wow 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 wow. After nibbling on melon seeds, the teenager went to school as a little girl, and flicked the shell of the melon seeds out of the mountain. Although Jun Chen didn't know Bai Yi's Taoism whether there would be any difference, there may be some changes or it may remain the same. Jun Chen didn't bother to explore, so she put her hands on the back of her head and began to close her eyes. At this moment, a few drinking friends who shared wheel and woe together took a walk to the top of the mountain to enjoy the scenery. There was the former owner of the Land Dragon Palace site, the sword fairy Bai Deng, who was about to become the Tiefu River water god. There is also a ghost silver deer whose realm is an external object, and the heirloom of Jinghao, the first person on Luxiaza mountain, who is Gao Gung in the Jade Pure realm. Bai Deng must come here to discuss with Chen Pingan about making up for the Iron Talisman Jiangshui Temple. After all, the two sides will be close neighbors in the future. In fact, Gao Gung is reluctant to come to Luopao Mountain as a guest again, and Yinlu can't run away from the temple, so he must return to Luopao Mountain. So Yinlu and Bai Deng came together and felt that they had to bring their friend Gao Gung back to Luopao Mountain together. It's good to have friends to take care of them. The three of them are really afraid of that kid in green clothes with the Taoist name Jingqing. He is hospitable and addicted to alcohol. In fact, it's nothing. My friends don't want to drink. The problem is that Chen Lingjun, who was born in Yuzhong Water Snake, is now Yuaning, but he is a close friend with the Dragon Slayer. He beat and scolded Chen Qinglu at the wine table, either slapping his shoulder or slapping his head. Not to mention the three of them, even the old Feishing with the Taoist name Qinggong Taibao at the wine table was afraid of this. What was the result? At a wine table, the boy in Xing Yi was the main escort, and Jinghao had to take turns with Chen Qinglu as the second escort. Bai Deng's several guests, if you don't drink enough, can you leave the table, dare to leave the table? Drinking is always when the mood is good or bad, and then invite friends and friends to have a drink, talk to each other without restraint, ridicule a few words, solve problems, say a few wine words or not use the wine. The cowhide of drafting can't become a kind of unshakable homework twice a day in the morning and evening. If you just don't drink a morning drink, you'll be like a naughty boy who doesn't know how to make progress. Even if you drink immortal brew, how can the taste be better? Fortunately, Bai Deng and Gao Gung were guests at Luopao Mountain this time, and Chen Lingjun set a table of wine with a face full of guilt and embarrassment, explaining that the last time they invited them to drink, it belonged to the public expenditure of the accountant of Luopao Mountain, and there was no need to spend it by himself. Now it is a personal friendship, and in the future, there may be no way to greet my brothers with 2 drinks a day, unless those kinds of expensive immortal brews are replaced by ordinary immortal wines that are a bit cheaper. Can we drink morning wine? 3 people. They looked at each other in dismay and were almost so excited that they wept on the spot, and then they showed their magical powers to persuade Senior Jingqing. For this kind of thing, Gao Gung said that when Bai Deng fills the shortage of the Iron Fu Jiang water god, our brothers will set up a table. Bai Deng said to wait for the silver. Lu became the official cultivator of Luopao Mountain, and he was responsible for whatever wine he drank. Yinlu said that Gao Gung should not care about public affairs and private affairs. He would often come to Beipingzu and Luopao Mountain in the future, inform his brothers in advance and make an early appointment go. The little boy in Xingyi was very moved when he heard these warm words, and he mentioned it 3 times in a row. In order to distance himself from the wild fairy hairpin city, Yinlu has already greeted Luopeishan in earnest. After the consent of the master of Yingguan Mountain and the longevity of the law, the official pseudonym is now wrong. The word Rizhang, no track number yet. It has already been recorded in the Hukou of Huaihuang County Government Office. In this regard, the ghost Yinlu became a handyman disciple who was temporarily not listed in Luopao Mountain, the second in history. As the first outer sect disciple of Luopeishan's newly appointed genealogy officer, the white-haired boy has nothing to do now, so he will talk to Yinlu and ask him to be ashamed, then brave, practice hard, and don't lose our Luopeishan handyman disciple. Dao Mei's face, otherwise you Yinlu will be disgraceful, slack in your practice and not a person, so don't blame yourself a patriarch for turning your face and not recognizing anyone. Without having to drink so dimly every day, Gao Gung finally has a leisurely mood to discover the beautiful scenery of Luopao Mountain and the Vassal Mountains. There are more than 40 hills in the west of the town. Upon closer inspection there are magical things everywhere, but limited by the realm, I still feel that it is looking at flowers in the fog which is not real. When I came to the top of the mountain today, I saw a boy and a little girl sitting on the railing, and a burly man standing in another direction. Except for Hu Shan, who worships Zhou Mili, the other two do not recognize it. Bai Deng just left the Dragon Palace ruins a few days ago, and Yinlu is in a similar situation. He has been imprisoned by the hidden official for a long time. After hitting a brick, it was actually only a few days after they came out to watch the wind, so they all asked Gao Gung if he knew the other's roots, and Gao Gung just shook his head and said he didn't know. The silver deer and a few of them didn't even think about getting close to that young man with a tiger-headed hat, an expert outside the world? Is there such a worldly master? Although Luopao Mountain often has high-ranking people with intimidating identities and realms to visit here, but if they feel that the real person does not show their appearance, I am afraid that few people go out and are willing to dress like this. So Gao Gung and the others walked up to the burly man with his arms around his chest and introduced their names and Dao names one after another. Jun Qian returned the salute with a smile. I've admired the name for a long time, it's a pleasure to meet you. Bai Deng felt that it was a little boring, empty-headed, and the man in front of him, except that he might have heard of Gao Gung and King Gongshen, whose name did he look up to for a long time himself? Or is even the pseudonym of freshly baked Zheng wrong? However, since he was in Luopao Mountain, Bai Deng didn't dare to express his feelings. As for Gao Gung, he even started to talk nonsense about the weather and scenery with the man beyond the railing at the top of the mountain. Mr. Bai, how did you and Mr. Junqian become friends? Compared to match. Because the content of the conversation, the big and the small, did not use the means of the heart. The name you heard first, Mr. Bai? Can't really tell. Can you count the number of Qi practitioners with the surname Bai? Junqian. If Haoran is anywhere else, it's nothing but in this Luopao Mountain, on the top of Qinshan's own territory. Gao Gung, who originally followed the burly man with his back against the railing, straightened his waist in an instant, moved quickly to straighten his clothes, and his face was solemn and heavy. Yinlu was even beaten by the Mr. Junqian of the millet grain, like gongs and drums beating in his ears. Haoran Lu Shirlu, one of the direct disciples of the old Xiaotsai, may not know exactly what the route is in the wild world and mountains, but how could Xianzhu City not hear some news about the top of the mountain? Yinlu's mood was extremely complicated at the moment. Not only was his fear splitting, but he was also somewhat close to his compatriots. Only the poor Bai Deng, who is the grandson of a land dragon palace, is still kept in the dark. Gao Gung and Yinlu are very confused should they tell their friends the terrifying truth. The strange and most ferocious in ancient times, it only repels dragons and snakes but not mosquitoes. Is there any difference between Bai Deng seeing this person, and seeing Qin Qinglu the dragon slayer? The only difference is that one is just beheaded, the other is killed and eaten, or swallowed and then strangled. Maybe all the dragons in the world that Qin Qinglu slaughtered in 3,000 years were the leftovers of this burly man in his early years? Gao Gung and Yinlu held their breath and bowed to the Mr. Junqian together. This time they both made up for the division or used the old name, Luxiaza King Gongshen Gao Gung, see Mr. Lu. Wild Xianxian City Yinlu, see Mr. Lu. Junqian smiled and reached out and pressed twice. Gao Gung, we are all guests of Luopao Mountain, so you don't need to be so polite. Fellow Taoist Yinlu, we are half of our own family in Luopao Mountain, let alone be polite, what do you think? Gao Gung felt that it was very reasonable, and his Taoist heart was finally held and not broken. Fellow Taoist Yinlu felt that what Senior Lu Shirlu said was a great truth. Just one wave after another. The little girl in black in the distance has a question and answer with the boy in the mink hat. Mr. Bai, can you beat Mr. Junqian who has 2 fists and a bowl? I could beat it before but I can't beat it now and I can beat it in the future. Wait until the dried fish is finished? That still can't beat Junqian. In the Gao Gingxin Lake in the Jade Purity realm, a huge wave was once again set off. This Tao heart, don't worry about it. There are several Qi practitioners in the world, dare to say that they have been, and will, be able to beat Lu Shirlu. His surname is Bai. A tiger-headed hat misleads me too much. The silver deer, who was already a ghost, was almost scared to death on the spot, and he was so distraught. A few years ago there was Howran Bey who was in Fuyazu, and how many thrones did one person choose? Only Baden is lucky enough to know nothing. Knowing this, the three of them might as well accompany Qin Lingjun for a drink. Jun Qian crossed her arms around her chest and smiled. Is there anything else? Gao Gung and Yinlu wisely pulled their friend Bai Deng, and each pulled one of Bai Deng's arms and went down the mountain. Come calmly, go hastily. Bai Deng was confused. Gao Gung said in a trembling voice, have a drink? Yinlu resolutely agreed. Pressure and shock. Bai Deng asked suspiciously, what's the matter with you? After walking down the Shinto way and going to the house, Bai Deng asked, didn't I go to Taoist Jingqing for a drink? Gao Gung and Yinlu looked at each other. We Bai Den Taoist friends, stupid people have stupid blessings. Yinlu smiled and explained, why let Taoist Jingqing spend money on drinks, and the brothers close the door and drink. At the top of the mountain, Xiaomi asked curiously, Mr. Bai, listen to us, Jingqing, you are a swordsman, not a swordsman? Bai Yi smiled and said, I used to be a swordsman, but now I'm also a swordsman. To become a sword cultivator, Bai Yi is actually only interested in one thing, and strives to enter the 14th realm as soon as possible, so as to ask the sword in the blue sky and return the courtesy carefully. As for the tiger-headed hat on his head, it was swindled by an old scholar before, and he faked the imperial decree, saying that the most holy master repeatedly reminded him that he must wait for the Jade Pure realm to take it off. It was only after he entered the Jade Purity realm that Bai gradually became accustomed to the playful eyes of the Taoist officials of the sword immortal lineage at Xuanduguan. I don't know who spread it out, saying that he practiced swords carefully and entered the Jade Purity realm just to get rid of that. Wearing a ridiculous tiger head hat, Bai just thought that it would be fine for a few days later, otherwise he would just enter the realm of Jade. Do he still need a ceremony to celebrate? After entering the immortal realm, Bai also thought that it would be better to enter the Ascension realm in one go. Anyway, he didn't plan to go out and travel before that. I never thought that Jun Qian would take him to visit the mighty Aquarius continent. After coming and going, Bai always wore this tiger hat. Who is the enemy in the world? Ask a sword? Just who dares to take the initiative to find their own trouble? With Bai Yi's cold personality, he can't get enough to eat and deliberately make enemies for himself. When it comes to taking disciples and teaching them knowledge or swordsmanship, Bai Yi is actually more afraid of this kind of trouble. He had thought about this kind of scene seriously, but found that there was no way to teach it. Mr. Bai, shall I test you a riddle? One person has 3 rooms with 2 doors open. The room this person is standing in is all useful objects. The next room is different. The room is different. But it's big, some are useful, some are useless, some masters remember, outsiders don't know, some can't even remember the masters but outsiders remember. Finally, the 3rd room is even more amazing. Sometimes I feel that when I open the door, the inside is colorful, and it must be very beautiful. Some people sometimes think that the inside must be gray or even dark, and it has no meaning at all, and they don't want to open it. Look, what are the names of the 3 rooms? Bai also smiled and said nothing. Millet Grain comforted, just guess, it's okay if you can't guess, this is the most difficult to guess in my big basket of riddles, the difficulty of the riddle, at least it can be ranked in the top 3. Bai Yi said, is the answer to the mystery yesterday, today, tomorrow? Millet's eyes lit up, and she handed the last dried fish to Bai Yi and said sincerely, Mr. Bai, your ability to guess riddles is as good as a good mountain master. Bai Yi smiled and just took half of the dried stream fish and asked, who taught you the riddle? Millet chewed on dried fish, shook his head, and knocked lightly on the railing with his heels. Almost all of them were given to me by Bishop of Goodman Mountain, but the riddle that I asked Mr. Bai just now was my own. Bai Yi smiled and said, Xiaoli, have you ever heard a story about a tree between heaven and earth which divides the north and the south? There is a fish in the north, a pond in the south, the fish turns into birds, and the mountains can be carried on the back. The rivers, on their backs, are as small as mustard seed boats, and they perch in ponds with heavy loads, and birds migrate between the north and the south with the sea. Xiaomi Mili exclaimed, there are still such big fish in the world. The well-informed mountain master has never told me this strange story. Bai Yi nodded and said, this big fish has a huge body, and it may be as famous as the wine of Dumb Lake. Millet nodded vigorously and laughed. Bai Yi asked, Xiaoli, do you yearn for that kind of magical power? Xiaomi Mili shook her head vigorously, no, I like to stay at home and I don't like to travel far. Just talking about Dong Chun, she wakes up every morning, her boxing skills are too low, she can't even beat a warm quilt, and she always has two helpers called Sleepy and Cold Chill Quilt. Every time I talk to them a fight is hard to win. If it weren't for the duty of patrolling the mountains in the early morning, she would have slept until the sun was up. At that time she also had two helpers, named Taiyang and Branch Birds. Bai also nodded, indicating that he understood. He reached out and rubbed the millet's head. The little girl hurriedly turned her head. She couldn't touch it, she was not tall. Without thinking about Bai, he also took the initiative to bend his head and turn his head. Millet reached out and patted the tiger hat, tilted his head again and laughed loudly. I won't grow taller today, so let's talk about it tomorrow. Bai also rubbed the little girl's head, squinted and smiled, raised his hand and patted his knee, but didn't say anything. Jun Qian leaned against the railing in the distance. Yes, the wine today, the moon on a May, the sorrow tomorrow. The sorrow grows 3,000 feet long, the blue sky is bottomless, and the dreadful road is unreachable, making Bai unhappy. Millet's eyes were bright, her face flushed red. She pricked up her ears and asked softly, Mr. Bai, are you brewing a poem that can be remembered for thousands of years when you say it? Bai Yi shook his head and smiled and said, since I've practiced swordsmanship, I'll practice swordsmanship well. I made an agreement with Jun Qian that I'll only drink occasionally, and I won't write poetry anymore. Jun Qian sighed. No matter how white is, poetry is invincible, and the world is lonely for thousands of years. When Millet heard what Mr. Bai said, he was a little sad and a little lost. Sad, the little girl felt that Mr. Bai seemed a little sad. As for Meili Xiao's loss, it was because Meili came to see Mr. Bai. She was selfish, really embarrassed. Millet just wanted to get acquainted with Mr. Bai, so that he could help his family Luo Pashan to ask for a well-known poem. After all, he has been in Luopao Mountain for so long, and he has never made an inch. Sister Nuanshu always praises herself, and Pei Qian will often put her credit in the credit book, but she is not a fool, she knows that they are amusing herself. But it's nothing anyway. After reading so many military books, the 36 strategies are thoroughly memorized, and things like making meritorious achievements will be discussed tomorrow. I'm so happy to be able to chat with Mr. Bai today. So the little girl asked Mr. Bai to stretch out a hand. The boy with the tiger head cap was still not sure what the little girl was thinking, but he still smiled and stretched out his palm, guessing whether the millet grains would turn into melon seeds and small dried fish from the sleeves or the cotton satchel. Unexpectedly, Xiaomi just raised her hand to make a fist, lowered her head and let out a sigh of relief, and then tapped lightly on Mr. Bai's palm, spread out her hand as if putting something. Mr. Bai, don't be sad, I'll lend you some happiness and joy. Bai also smiled, clenched his fist and waved his wrist, then I'll accept it. Before you know it, time has passed, one big and one small chatting like this. The world is already a bright moonlit night, and there is a lot of moonlight in the desolate mountains. Millet swayed her legs gently, carefree, looking into the distance from her own home. Bai Yi asked, Xiaoli, do you think there are many people like you in the world and many people who are not like you? I see or not, you are all in the world and each has its own joys and sorrows. Millet stretched out her hand and scratched her cheek. She was a big water monster who was born in Dumb Lake and said shyly, probably yes, right? Without hearing Mr. Bai continue to speak, she turned her head, raised her head again and found that Mr. Bai, who was beside him, stood up and stretched a lot. Does Mr. Bai want to write poetry? Isn't there a saying in the book that everyone is happy and prosperous? Bai Yi bowed his head and smiled and said, it's not poetry. But in the future, Bai will also hand over swords, which can also be considered poetry. Millet nodded vigorously. Silently memorize this statement, it will be used later. She once borrowed a statement from Lu Dajiao, and has not returned it to him until today. It is not difficult to go out and rely on friends when you are in the arena. The young man with a tiger head cap stretched out a hand, who used to be a majestic white person in the past, but now a sword immortal in the Qingming world, said loudly, the great fortune is not prosperous, the birds are singing at night, there are exiled immortals under the moon, and the breath is dry. Stop the cups, gentlemen, please see my generation of swordsmen wave their hands to break the clouds, shake the day and command the sky. When Jun Qian heard his big words, she just smiled knowingly. Her friend Bai Yi is naturally still Bai Yi. The background of a scholar with a normal heart bears fruit. In the end he became the real sword immortal Bai. At this moment, Jun Qian heard Bai Yi's embarrassing words. Jun Qian, I seem to have seen someone somewhere just become a sword cultivator. I looked at him and saw a green lotus blossom in his heart. Jun Qian was stunned for a moment, then suddenly realized. I see. I want to come to the lotus root blessed land of Taoist temples in the past, and now the lotus root blessed land of Luopao Mountain. The young sword cultivator, in the blessed land, and the sword fairy Bai Yi outside the blessed land actually saw themselves. Sword of Coming Chapter 1189. Chapter 1189 Miscellaneous Peanut Tree. In a certain year on the top of the mountain, Bai Yi and Jun Qian sat for a while and chatted about the 3 rivers in Hangzhou town, among which was the Yuya River. Millet Grain has already left, jumping up and down, carrying a golden pole on his shoulders, holding a green bamboo stick, and the beloved cotton bag that is slung across the side, and there are no troops in it for the time being. Bai has also heard some stories and said with a smile, "Your junior brother Chen is easy to talk." Jun Qian explained, Zhu Lian played a fist in the Yuya River, and the younger brother also went to the water house as a guest. If the Luapa mountainside is persistent, there will be suspicion of being aggressive. Bai also smiled. Jun Qian said, "The most important thing is that the millet grains will feel sorry for themselves. The more Luopuxian does, the bigger the slap in the face, the more uproar, the more silent she will be when she is alone in the mountains. She is timid and feels outside the rivers and lakes in my life are a bit dangerous, so I don't dare to go out and am not too timid, but I just don't want to go out." There is still a difference in the state of mind. Therefore, the junior brother actually thinks a lot about this matter and must grasp the proportions. Don't be too wishful thinking. You must know this turmoil from the very beginning. Xiaomi Li wanted to hide it, pretending that nothing happened, but was accidentally bumped into by Pei Qian. In fact, Xiaomi Li always wanted to say something but I was worried that I couldn't say it well, which would make Pei Qian and the others sad, so I had to keep it in my heart. Bai also nodded, yes. It's more difficult to compare one's heart to one's heart. It can be seen that Bai also said that Qin Pingan protected her very well, which is not a mistake. Jun Qian said with a smile. Afterwards, Zhu Lian gave an analogy to the millet and made a truth in a half-joking tone, so that the millet could completely unravel the knot. It is said that after hearing it, the millet burst into laughter and was happy. I have to roll all over the place and feel that some of the old cook's words have come to my heart. Bai Yi asked curiously, "Can this little girl's heart not be untied?" Jun Qian nodded, took out a jar of an unknown xianxia old wine from her sleeve and said slowly, "Yes." Zhu Lian first told her a story about the landscape of his hometown to describe the storm, saying that there is a woman from a prominent family was hurt by love, and she caused a heartless man's family to be destroyed, and the man himself had his leg broken. The woman's eyebrows stood upright, she gritted her teeth and said that you were just lame in crutches, but I was heartbroken. Who is more pitiful? Millet was worried at first and asked the old cook if it was true. Zhu Lian said it was made up. Millet is relieved. Then Zhu Lian asked whether Millet was still angry. If he was angry, I would let the water goddess limping to Luopao Mountain to apologize to you. Millet was taken aback and hurriedly let go. The old cook swore that he would not do such a bad thing. Then Zhu Liansai asked Xiaoli if it was this matter, if we kept on holding on to Luopaotian, in fact the right protector who had turned the page long ago, would never be in his heart. In the past, but I didn't dare to say anything because I was afraid of being misunderstood because I didn't have a conscience, so I didn't dare to say anything at all. Millet nodded vigorously, so Zhu Lian explained to her that the mountain master who returned home made a special trip to Shuifu to fight for you. Beating the water goddess once, it's not as simple as revenge. In addition to helping you ask for the justice that you must have, I also want to let her and the whole water mansion have a long memory, then there will be all the other places like millet grains in the future. People walking in the boundary of Yuya Jianghu, no matter who they are, whether their status or realm is high or not, they will not be bullied casually by them again, and they will no longer dare to bully others, so it can be said that you have credit for the millet grains. Yes, there is no grievances and hardships in vain. If you don't take care of yourself this time, there may be a lot of millet grains on the Yuya River in the future, and Shuifu will make mistakes again and again, occasionally kicking an iron plate. Now they don't think it's something wrong. At most, they just think that the signboard of the water house is not loud enough, and the water goddess fist is not hard enough. Millet, do you think this is good? Millet said aloud. Is it bad? Zhu Lian smiled and said that son, the last time I took you to the water mansion as a guest, I had some knowledge. I didn't ask the goddess of water aggressively to ask the teacher for guilt, but I didn't take it lightly. Once I opened it up, the sun was like leaving a boot in the water mansion. Since it was left behind, if the boots are in someone else's house, they will be retrieved one day sooner or later. The goddess of water and the Yuya Jianghu have to take it easy. Last time, Shanzhu Qin didn't get into a rage and didn't care too much about Shuifu, so what about the next visit? Will there be a new account and the old account to be calculated together, and the two crimes will be punished? Millet is amazed, the good man is so powerful, the old river, the old river. Finally Zhu Lian smiled and said, Millet, you are timid now. I don't dare to hang out in places other than Luopao Mountain. You think that the goddess of water dares to leave the temple and the water house. She is not as brave as a grain of rice. Besides us, I heard that Wei Shanjun is the immediate boss. Seems to have mentioned to her once so that she doesn't have to think too much, she won't die. Millet, listen to me, do you hide the knife in the smile, murderous but frighten the goddess of water? If the story only develops here, nothing well. After Meili was happy in Julien's yard, she got up the courage that day and secretly ran to a small bamboo forest in Piyun Mountain to count the bamboos. As for what me and I talked about with Wei Shanjun, who appeared in a hurry, it seemed like he was hanging on a hook. It has been unchanged for 100 years, it is a mystery. Bai Yi smiled and said, it's hard for you to say so much in one breath. Now that you have the content, what about the title? My good friend Jun Qian is not good at words. In the past, when we traveled together in famous mountains, Jun Qian neither likes to talk about ancient deeds, nor does he want to talk more about context and study. Jun Qian said, as long as it is not in the 15th realm, it will be blinded by one leaf. Bai Yi also held the tiger's head cap and sighed, 15 realms. Jun Qian suddenly smiled and said, take you to a village school, you can't eat melon seeds and eat dried fish for nothing, you have to do a little favor for the younger brother. Then Bai was also shrunk by Jun Qian and dragged to a neat study in a school by the river. Jun Qian began to take out a manuscript and turned to a page skillfully. The landscape story in the book told about a river and lake ranger. They strayed into Xianxia with the giant water monster of Dumb Lake. The outline of the story is that they met 3 masters with different styles, and they fought a poem and returned with a great victory. Bai also looked around and guessed that this was the place where Qin Shanju was the teacher. Jun Qian spread out the pages of the manuscript, telling Bai Yi to stop being stupid and take a closer look. Bai also walked over to take a look, glanced a few times and wanted to stay out of the matter, but Jun Qian held down the tiger hat and said with an angry smile, I'm not talking about the righteousness of the rivers and lakes, Malu, I'm here to help with ink research, you don't try to run. It turns out that in this manuscript, the content of the fighting poems is not too short, but every time the young man surnamed Qin recites poems, all the content of the poems on the booklet is blank. However, when the protagonist recites a poem, how do they go from disapproving at first to contempt after hearing Qin Xiaoxia improvised poems of great prose by the 3 mountain fairy masters who were born in the mountains but like to be arty? The expression to the point where they twitched their beards and groaned in silence, and their hearts were shaken, and then to how they couldn't hide their admiration, they were shocked, and finally they were completely convinced and willing to bow down. But they wrote it very carefully, not stingy with words, let Bai Yi and Jun Qian. The book turner sees the words face to face. Is this Qin Shanju so talented without poetry? More than a dozen poems and the manuscripts are all empty. How hard is it to write poetry? Jun Qian has already started to fetch a piece of inkstone, dripping water and researching ink. Bai also shook his head and said, it's not a joke when I said not to write poetry. Jun Qian smiled and said, use your old poems. Bai Yi said helplessly, it's not that you don't know, most of the poems I've written have been forgotten by myself. What I haven't forgotten, are often compiled into poetry collections by good people and circulated around the world. I copy my own and Qin Pingan copy me, what's the difference? He might as well copy some obscure poems from a lesser-known poet. Jun Qian said, I remember all your abandoned poems. You can copy the content when I say it. As for the title of the poem, you have to make up your own. Bai also flipped through a few pages of the manuscript, and then turned to the content written in the last new chapter, and found that from the beginning to the end, it was the landscape story of the Jianghu young hero and the dumb lake monster. Occasionally, I learned to write a novel from the deputy head of the Confucian temple, Han. Bai also remembered that when she was on the top of the mountain before, Xiaomi Li talked about her first time out for a walk, as if she was looking for a passing scholar who owed her a story? If it wasn't for the face of the millet, Bai would not be willing to do such a thing. What is the difference between wearing 2 tiger hats on his head? Bai Yi sat on the chair, took the brush handed over by Jun Qian, thought for a moment and said, remember that trip to Mount Lu, there seemed to be 2 ancient poems in Qijue, and they were well written. Jun Qian reminded, you can't come up with the peak of poetry, remember to put away the first few poems, in total these 12 poems, literary skills, must be gradual, especially the finale must be worthy of the amazement and reputation of the 3 immortal masters in the book. Bai also raised his hat, so much nonsense you write? Jun Qian smiled and said, "I'm not too small. If I were a junior brother, I would stand here with a blue brick." Before Bai Yi wrote the pen, he asked, "I owe Qin Pingan a big favor for this Taoist spectacle. How can it be counted?" If Qin Pingan had a plan long ago, but was taken first by an outsider himself, the debt would be even greater. Jun Qian reported an old poem and then said, "You are my good friend and he is my little junior brother, then according to the old rules, I will not favor the two, and you can discuss it yourself." Just as Bai Yi was about to write, Jun Qian suddenly said, "Senior brother Cui said back then that you can write cursive script with a decent style. After all, the name of the poem is there, and later generations of calligraphers are willing to tout a few words against their heart." Talking about the change of name to Zhenghuo, and the current Zirizhang, both Gao Geng and Bai Deng were amazed and greatly admired. One said that fellow Taoist Yinlu really has real talents and practical learning, and the other said that he is worthy of the way of a gentleman. The secret is in the sun, and the gentleman is deep and humble, and it is difficult to know how to retreat. Yinlu was annoyed and hesitated, but in the end he didn't tell the truth about the two sworn brothers. He was detained by a young hidden officer and had to write something every day. The latter often came here to check the content and told Yinlu that since now that you are a half-baked novelist, you should take out the correct attitude of doing one's work, loving one's work, and becoming a champion in every line of work, and try to write as many articles as possible every day regardless of the length, with the first and foremost sincerity, and every word in every word. Don't make a fool of yourself. The house of the boy in Tsing-yi and the girl in pink skirt are not far from each other. Tonight, Qin Lingjun, who had neither drink nor the mind to practice, sat on the steps in a daze, suddenly stood up, sneakily picked up a stone from the courtyard, threw it at another house and threw it on the roof. Above, the stones tumbled and screeched. Soon the stupid girl's inner voice rebuked, "Qin Lingjun, are you bothered?" Qin Lingjun looked bewildered and asked in his heart, "Nuanshu, what's the matter with you? But I don't want you to misunderstand people like this. The family was burglarized?" Nuanshu said angrily that you are so boring. "I will tell the mountain master tomorrow." Qin Lingjun was not afraid of anything, but he was only afraid of this complaint, so he could only defend angrily, "I was just looking through a book of spiritual books specializing in water law in the courtyard, and when I saw something I knew, I couldn't help but imitate it." She shook her hand at the immature Taoist method. Before Qin Lingjun could finish speaking, the grumpy and stupid girl started to train people again. "Edit, you continue to edit it. It is best to compile the name of the Taoist book and the content of the Taoist art together." Fortunately, Jiang Shangzhen happened to be sitting on the roof of his mansion, and asked with a smile, "Nuanshu Jingqing, what are you arguing about?" Nuanshu and Chief Zhou gave a blessing and went back to the house. Her desk was full of account books that recorded trivial expenses, and she didn't have time to pay attention to Qin Lingjun, the guy who didn't do his job properly. Qin Lingjun pointed his toes a little and floated towards the roof of Chief Zhou's side. He was a little embarrassed. He lowered his voice and said, "Chief Zhou, the little girl's family is so fierce, how can you marry in the future, right?" Jiang Shangzhen lay on his back with a jade porcelain pillow on his head, his hands on his abdomen, and smiled, "I think Nuanshu is not worried about marriage." Qin Lingjun changed the subject. "Since the long night has been long and unintentional sleep, why did Chief Zhou not drink?" Jiang Shangzhen opened his eyes and looked at the sky, smiled and said, "I was thinking about the high and low mountains and the clouds hanging over the feet. Depending on the situation, there is going to be a torrential rain. Carry a large bucket and a large wash basin in one hand to catch the rain." Qin Lingjun heard it like a cloud, but he didn't lose and he started talking nonsense. "This is not easy. If rainwater can be used as money, see if I don't fill the courtyard with pots and pans." Jiang Shangzhen said with a smile, "Wei Shanjun still has something. If I am Shanjun, the best name I can think of is probably Lingza." In fact, in Jiang Shangzhen's opinion, if Pai Yunshan and Wei Bo were to make up his own name Lingza, this choice is actually quite good, and the short-term benefit is greater than that of Night Tour, because it is the most suitable for that unseen event in 10,000 years. Time of the day. Of course, in the long run, it may be more secure to travel at night, the benefits of the Great Road and the long flow of water. Qin Lingjun was lying on the roof. Jiang Shangzhen suddenly reached out and grabbed the arm of the boy in Tsing-yi, and said with a smile, "Jingqing, who leaked the sincere words I praised the law of longevity at the wine table?" Qin Lingjun hurriedly sat up, not only did not have the slightest guilty conscience, on the contrary, his face was full of smugness, his arms crossed his chest, and he asked Chief Zhou for credit. "I must be the one who told Xiaomi to listen to it, and then let her little ear tell the gods." For the longevity of the law, Chief Show, think about it, how many years have you been a bachelor? You look good and have a solid family background. Apart from being older, can you pick out any faults? There must be no problem. She is single, not to mention that she doesn't like that kind of young man with a tender and unsteady face at first sight. In this case, why can't you two get together before a man is married and a woman is not married? I don't think you're embarrassed to speak, Chief Show. If you are so thoughtful about changing the law of longevity, she will reveal some rumors to Xiaoli. I hear it again to Chief Show. With that said, hey, isn't it possible? One palm law, one chief, you are a match made in heaven, kissing and kissing. Rao is Jiang Shangzhen, who has seen the big world, but he was also speechless for a long time, with lingering fears in his heart, and said in a trembling voice, I thank you. If you are a matchmaker like this, don't do it in the future. Qin Lingjun lowered his voice and asked, what, do you think it's inappropriate, or Chief Show has a high vision and thinks that we have a cold temperament? You don't look down on her. Hey, this is because you are ignorant, right? The old cook and the Dafeng brothers, but they both said the same thing. There are many female heroes in the book who look like frost and those fairies who look at people thousands of miles away. Wait until they are moved. Jiang Shangzhen, whose scalp was numb, hurriedly restrained the Tsing boy's neck, and then stretched out his hand to cover his mouth. I beg you, Master Jingqing, please don't say another word. In a warmly lit room not far away, Mimi, who came to visit here, stood on the small bench and listened to the window. Finally, she couldn't hear the sound over there. Mimi turned her head and asked curiously, Sister Nuanshu, is that true? Nuanshu, who was turning over the account book, stretched out his hand to hold the abacus and spat. Jiang Shangzhen covered Uncle Chen's mouth and asked, drink or not? I heard that you have a few new friends, so why don't you help with referrals? Just nod your head and shake your head if you don't drink. Chen Lingjun hurriedly pecking at the rice. Jiang Shangzhen dared to let go of Chen Lingjun, glanced at the mansion not far away, closed the door to drink. The lights were dimly lit, and he didn't dare to punch. Can he really drink? Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, those few seem to have left you to drink. Chen Lingjun was stunned for a while and sighed, it's your fault, Chief Show. Jiang Shangzhen was at a loss. Why do you blame me? Chen Lingjun grinned and said, I and some of my friends accidentally carried money with me before, and they don't dare to ask me for a drink now. Who do you blame? Jiang Shangzhen smiled knowingly, I really blame me. Falling together on the bluestone road, Jiang Shangzhen hugged the back of his head with both hands, and Chen Lingjun threw his two sleeves into a crackling sound. Jiang Shangzhen said with a smile, Mandarin ducks cross necks for 1,000 years, and the wings are in harmony with the colorful feathers. The piano and the selves are harmonious for 100 years, and the white heads share the old haze. People who come here will occasionally be jealous of you people who have come here. It was rare for Chen Lingjun not to make fun of Chief Zhou, and he immediately understood the different meanings of the two people who came here. The boy in Tsingyi said softly, he'll accompany you to drink a few more drinks later. Jiang Shangzhen nodded and suddenly asked, Brother Chen, what do you think of me taking the initiative to let Xian and Mr. Xiao Mo be the chief worshipper? Chen Lingjun's head was as big as a bucket in an instant. Is this a proposition? I treat you as my good brother, and my brother will exchange my head for wine money? The brothers who died at the wine table, what is the morality of the rivers and lakes in the bowl? Chen Lingjun's eyes rolled sharply and said, Chief Zhou, let me chew on it. If you are good, don't let the sages. Not everyone can be the chief worshipper. Without waiting for Jiang Shangzhen to say anything, the boy in Tsingyi took 2 steps and 3 steps, kicked open the door of Baideng's mansion with 1 foot, and smiled with his arms on his hips. Brothers, it's really a bit early to hide for breakfast at night, haha. At the foot of the mountain, the Taoist priest with the wooden hairpin on his head raised his hand and dipped his saliva in the saliva. He used the moonlight as a light to slowly turn over a page of a book. It was a big night when there were few people, so it was suitable to read books and ban books. It is worthy of being a strategic book highly recommended by Chief Zhou. It is true that there are many fights in many battlefield locations, all of which are unheard of before. Serious fighting, well written, mixed with fiction and reality, and occasionally left blank, the aftertaste is lingering. Tsing-yi and cotton evangelistic robes are warm, the sound of reading books is rustling, and the wooden hairpin often cherishes the water in front of the steps. The place where my heart is at ease is my hometown. A sudden slap on the shoulder almost didn't make our guilty conscience Taoist Xianwei go far. Xianwei didn't care whether it was useful or not, he choked with his hands, chanted words, and used a Taoist formula that is said to be able to calm the soul, and then quickly turned his head to look, only to find that it was his own Dafeng brother standing behind him with a bamboo chair. Xianwei. complained, "Well, you are so elusive, scaring me to death, you are going to be the gatekeeper again." Zheng Dafeng smiled and put the bamboo chair aside. "I will pinch the 3 locks and lock the door, and I won't scare you to death." Taoist Master Xianhui said in surprise, "I spent a dozen copper coins to buy the Taoist book from the roadside stall in the ferry, is it really not a lie?" Zheng Dafeng said, "Of course it's a scam, but I can't deceive you." Xianhui smiled, not taking it seriously. Zheng Dafeng hugged the back of his head with both hands, raised Erlang's legs and slumped on the bamboo chair like that, suddenly moved his buttocks and gave a shudder. The whole person shivered, complaining to himself, "After all, I'm not a young and strong guy, I feel like is frozen. Before, when the weather was cold and the ground was freezing, I lay naked under the covers like a stove, people were hot and I didn't even need to burn charcoal." Wei Xian said with a smile, "The hero doesn't mention the courage of the past, Brother Dafeng is not as good as the old cook." Mr. Zhu didn't like to talk about his past hometown. He heard from the millet grain. Zhu Lian was in the lotus root blessed land. Zheng Dafeng said to himself, "If I have enough food and clothing, the sky will not let me down. If I don't make progress in my studies, how can I face the sky?" Xianhui smiled casually, "I think God is not so stingy." Zheng Dafeng smiled and patted the Taoist priest Xianhui on the shoulder. "You and I have the same illness, we are both laymen." Xianhui nodded, mistakenly thinking that Zheng Dafeng was saying that he was not good at cultivation, and at the same time laughed at himself, failed to become the top of martial arts. Zheng Dafeng glanced at the Book of War in Xianhui's hand. "Where's the next volume?" Xianhui sneakily turned his head to look at the mountain road. Seeing that no one was there, he took out another book from his sleeve and asked with a smile, "Look at the second volume without reading the first volume?" Zheng Dafeng took the book and began to put on the air of his predecessors. "Reading this kind of military book of fighting and killing, it's no different from the first volume, you can't wait for the time being and it's a little interesting. Luopao Mountain has one of the vassal hilltops, called Xiaodugang. Li Huai has a private mansion of his own here. In fact, there is also a private mansion on the other side of Luopao Mountain. It's just that the handmaid Wei Taijin is there." This way it was still the road led by Qin Lingjun. The boy in Tsingyi winked at him all the way, made Li Huai very embarrassed and explained it with his heart. Qin Lingjun just said that I understand and Li Huai was also helpless. You understand. You understand. When Li Huai was staying at Xiaodugang, Lin Shuyi and Dong Shuijing took Shijiachuan, who had temporarily settled in Taoye Lane, to visit here. Anyway, the mansion in the mountains, they all have a share. However, one of them is Dong Banzhou, who is rich in wealth, and the other is Lin Yupu, who treats money like dung and treats the gods in the mountains lightly as princes. It is estimated that Li Huai, who thought he had a big mansion before he was a child, took it seriously. In the past, the little abacus with braided horns seemed to be the one with the biggest change among her classmates, but they were all married women and had a pair of children. She was still a fan of wealth. When she heard that Xiaodugang also had her name on it, I made a special trip to the next mansion, and asked how much such a large mansion was worth. According to the current market situation in our hometown, Huaihuang County, if it were to be sold, it would be sold to the immortal master on the mountain. Why should she pay with fairy money or even that kind of small summer money, and can she rent it out when she doesn't live here? The annual rent is not old or young, right? In the years to come, when she is old, she will be gone one day, can she adopt it to her family and children? Listening to the chatter in front of them, Li Huai and the 3 of them were all smiling, and they could even joke about Shijiachuan, but when they heard her last question they all fell silent. Shijiachuan stopped at that time and looked at the expressions of several of them. Each of them, who were classmates in the past, was still very young, not to mention the handsome nerd Lin when he was a child. Dong Shuijing, who used to be a boring gourd every day, is also quite manly. Even Li Huai, who was often provoked to cry when he was a child, wore open-crotch pants and was a little bookish, like a serious young scholar. The woman stretched out her hand and brushed her hair on the temples and smiled softly. "My lord, if you're right, I'm not sad. Why are you sad for me? Do you actually have a crush on me early on?" Lin Shuyi, Dong Shuijing, you like Li Huai's sister, is it a trick? And Li Huai likes Li Baoping, is it also a pretense? Lin Shuyi and Dong Shuijing looked at each other and smiled. It was rare to talk about Li Lu. They didn't scold each other for being useless, and the chickens out of the cage pecked each other. Li Huai said helplessly, "Don't talk nonsense. If Li Baoping listens to her, she won't care about you. She insists that I can't eat and walk around." As a child, Li Huai's pants were often hung on trees, crouching on the ground and crying. The little girl in the red cotton jacket had long since disappeared. Mr. Chi, who came here after hearing the sound, probably had a lot of times. Later, he didn't seem to bother to ask the reason, so he had to use a long bamboo pole to help pick it down. The little treasure bottle was young and strong. His underpants were thrown on the top of the tree, and the bamboo poles were out of reach. Outside the school there were all the boys watching the fun. They gathered their heads together to help Mr. Chi come up with some bad ideas. Said he could climb trees. Mr. Chi smiled and shook his head, said look at me, picked up a stone on the ground, waited a few times, turned his arm a few times and then threw it into the sky. Unfortunately, it was empty. The stone just passed through the treetop, and there was a rustling sound. Through the golden light and shadow of the leaves falling on the ground, with the shaking of the leaves, the sunlight on the ground shattered and swayed. The schoolboys who craned their necks to watch all sighed. Mr. Chi was only a little short. Mr. Chi went to pick up another stone. This time he really succeeded in hitting a tall branch and the pants fell down. Li Huai quickly put on his pants. Happy ha, these trousers are very promising today, like a paper kite. Halfway through the road, I met the thin, weak and unattractive sister. She came to pick him up and went home. Li Huai told her sister about today's great achievements and said that she would wear these pants tomorrow, so don't be afraid of that. The little treasure bottle was over. Li Lu held his brother's hand. The girl just squinted and smiled, patiently listening to her brother's rude rambles. The child's grievance seems to be bigger than the sky, and he will always cry so hard that he can hoarse his voice. But often after a while the grievances are gone, like those home keys that never know where a child is dropped. Tonight, Li Huai put down a book of sages, walked out of the study and house, and walked all the way to the cliffside viewing platform with a pavilion. Recently I have collected some questions and I want to ask Qin Pingon for answers. For example, Li Huai can only understand the literal meaning of the phrase, a person who has attained the Tao is externalized but not internalized. Wei Taijin came quickly. Li Huai, who was lying lazily on the bench in the pavilion, immediately sat up, and Wei Taijin felt a little guilty, and she disturbed the master's peace and relaxation again. After Li Huai sat up, he asked with a smile, Mr. Bai, who is known as the most proud man in the world, is now in Luapa Mountain. Would you like to meet me? I can't say a few words in the face and I can't even guarantee that I will be closed like Wei Shanjun. He has a very good relationship with Xiaoli, and Xiaoli also thinks that Mr. Li is very powerful. The good person is such a generous person. It seems that it is because Mr. Li complained a little in the past that the good person now can't get over that hurdle. I always want everyone to think that their cooking skills are not bad at all. It's a pity that no one on Luopao Mountain, except millet grains and old cooks, seems to be willing to cheer up against their will. Wei Taijin shook his head vigorously. Young master, I don't dare to see Mr. Bai and I don't need to. Thinking of being able to live with Mr. Bai in the mountains, the servants are already very satisfied. That is Mr. Bai. For thousands of years, Mr. Bai has been the only one. Take green as white, iron bones and soft tendons. The body of the poem is here, the soul of ice and snow. Li Huai jokingly said, thanks to me, I even drafted the flattery. In fact, Li Huai is usually on Wei Taizin's side, and his words and deeds are still very sincere. He is afraid that Miss Wei will misunderstand him, and she is the kind of libertine who is not right, especially worried about ruining a woman's most important reputation. It was only after returning to his hometown and arriving at Luopao Mountain that Li Huai was completely relaxed, so he dared to be a little casual. In the Dasui Shanaya Academy, Li Huai is a sage after all. Outside the academy, Li Huai is also a disciple of Wensheng's lineage, so he will pay more attention to everything. Looking at Miss Wei, whose eyes were narrowed into crescent moons and covered her mouth with a sweet smile, Li Huai asked curiously, what are you laughing at? Wei Taijin said with a smile, the slave girl just imagined the scene of the young master and others slapping horses, and it was very funny. Li Huai Yen, tell you about what happened on my way to school when I was a child. Wei Taizin's eyes were bright and excited, and he hurriedly sat upright, placing his hands on his knees lightly. Okay. It's not a short story. Li Huai thought for a while, moistened his throat and said, then let's start from the moment I first met Qin Pingon. It was in the early spring when the grass was growing and the warbler was flying. If I remember correctly, I was 7 years old, Pingon is 14 years old. Li Huai only learned from the big white goose that Qin Pingon, who knew about it temporarily in order to have a good meal on his birthday, secretly fished at night for the whole night, and complained that Cui Dongshan would not set earlier. But the next day, Li Huai, who even forgot that it was his birthday, complained that he always eats fish and drinks fish soup. Braised chicken thighs, stir-fry a plate of chamois, stew a pot of overcooked hoof. Wei Taizhen hesitated for a moment, then asked in a low voice, "Young master, doesn't the book say that the miscellaneous peanuts, trees and grasses are growing and warblers fly? Doesn't it refer to the late spring season?" Li Huai hid the faint sadness in his eyes and smiled, "Because that spring was different, the story I'm going to tell is as long as this one." Lotus root blessed land, Pikexiang's by courtyard in Hus country. Xiego asked, "Since Mr. Zhu has followed Lu Xianyang and the others back to their hometown, why didn't they come to our side?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "He has no face to come. This trip back home, he must hide his head and hide his tail, and dare not see anyone. With a debt of love, a woman's spittle can drown him." Pei Xiang agreed. The men and women who lived in the same era as Zhu Lianshan are all unfortunate. Men, they can't beat that martial arts lunatic. Among those who have seen Zhu Lian's appearance, it is said that out of 10 women, 9 hate Zhu Lian, and 1 is because they have not seen him for the time being. Pei Xiang has been in the blessed land for a long time, and the Fox Country ban, this rule does not constrain her, the lord of the Fox Country, so Pei Xiang often goes out to relax, and knows that there are several landscape gods now, and she has always been missing Zhu Lian. One of them was the female martial arts master who died under Zhu Lian in the Battle of Nanyuan Kingdom's capital. They used to be a little bit of true spirit between the heavens and the earth. They inherited the spiritual energy and became female ghosts. They were transformed into gods by the heroic spirits of the heavens and the earth, and finally turned into gods. The noble son Zhu Lian, who was very romantic and monopolized 90%, like them, all died and came back to life. Of course, it was to meet again in order to take revenge on that ruthless man with a heartless heart, and they had long hated Zhu Lian to the point of itching their teeth. As long as the word Zhu Lian was mentioned, they would probably clench their teeth. On the border between Songlai State and northern Jin State, there is an autumn lake in Kaizhou. In the center of the lake is a hill with green mountains. On the mountain is a Taoist temple called Demugwan. Not long ago, within 100 miles of this huge lake, martial law had been imposed, and layers of checkpoints and secret posts had already been carefully arranged. There are several painting boats docked on the shore. In fact, those who can enter the boundary of Chiochi Lake, whether it is a chi practitioner, a martial artist, or a group of strange spirits, do not need to board the island by boat, so they choose to go to the center of the lake by punting across the lake. The island, that is, a picture of elegance and leisure. On the autumn lake tonight, more than 30 islands, large and small, are all brightly lit. Chen Pingan stood up suddenly, and in an instant, a pair of eyes turned pure golden, staring at someone, somewhere in the center of this blessed land, but it quickly returned to normal. Changming let out a faint sigh, feeling complicated. She didn't know how to persuade young master for a while. Xiego originally wanted to gloat over the misfortune, but he just thought that he was now the second seat of Luapa Mountain, so he pretended to be injustice for his own mountain master, stomped his feet hard and sighed. The sable-capped girl turned her head to look at the palm law. She was caught off guard, so she could only be a mute. Looking at her own performance, she would be very decent. Oh, it's hard to say who will be the big and the little in a few days. Chen Pingan sat back in his seat, smiled and said, "He'll just say it, it's hard to find a foot in one's life." Changming smiled bitterly and said in his heart, "Young master, although he is making wedding clothes for others, but the other party is him, seems to be able to accept it reluctantly?" Chen Pingan nodded, picked up the teacup and said with a smile, drink tea, be at ease." Leaguansis Lotus Root Blessed Land, Luopao Mountains Lotus Root Blessed Land. The old and new blessed land each take a word that is lotus. Probably this is the so-called coincidence is not a book. The vision of heaven and earth originated from the Xinxiang temple in the capital of Nanyuan, like a sword light drawing an arc, a long rainbow across the sky, and in an instant it fell in the center of the heaven and earth in the blessed land. With the first sword cultivator, even if Qin Pingan noticed this vision of heaven and earth for the first time, the change was so fast that the avatar of Fulu, who almost stared at his eyes, didn't have time to watch the Tao carefully. A foregone conclusion. Guizuji's eyes narrowed, not knowing what he was thinking. Pei Xiang had no idea what was going on. Qin Pingan realized it later, and after thinking for a while, he had a conjecture and said with a heartfelt smile, "It must have been deliberately done by the old Guanju, who has the intention not to let me get this big advantage. So, you can focus on the retreat as soon as possible." Changming nodded, but his tone was a bit complaining. Since the lotus flower blessed land has been divided into 4, the old Taoist priest stretched his hand too long. Chen Pingan hurriedly put down the teacup, coughed, and reminded anxiously, "You can't say that, don't forget the well digger when you drink water. The bright moon is bright in the blue sky." Lao Guanju snorted and said with a sneer, "It's really a good style, one elbow is turned inward than the other, and if you teach others to listen you will be moved." Xiao Mo originally planned to get up and say goodbye, and went to the Qingxin dynasty to find that Jianxiu and asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Who in Luapa Mountain talked to fellow Taoists. But make no mistake. Lao Guanju smiled and said, "It's the mother-in-law who is the incarnation of gold and copper money, and the long-lived Taoist friend who was brought out of the Great Wall of Sword Qi by your mountain master. She dislikes the poor way of reaching out too long and takes care of the East and the West." Xiao Mo didn't bother to ask the specific reason but just asked, "Friend Taoist is at Lotus Root Blessed Land, there is still a context that you haven't mentioned yet?" Lao Guanju said, "How to mention uprooted, mentioning radishes and causing pits. If I really do this, the Lotus Flower Blessed Land will not be considered a top-level blessed land, just fill in the landscape of those big holes. Good luck. The immortal money you need to put into Luopao Mountain, not to mention money, just that number can make a certain financial fan feel sore teeth, just think about it and your head will be as big as a dustpan." Xiao Mo reached out and took a jar of long-live wine, then raised the white bowl in his hand and said with a smile, "Taoist friend, in our longevity rule, each has its own master, and she is a follower of my son. She must always say a few words that can't be comprehensive, just treat her as an apology for her, sit for a while and drink a jar of wine with fellow Taoists." Lao Guanju smiled and nodded, "It's a rare opportunity to meet again after a long absence. One jar is not enough, so drink 2 more jars." Xiao Mo looked at the few drinks left on the table and said with a smile, "It's almost done, let's leave it." Lao Guanju said, "There are more wine cellars, not less than this jar or 2. Xiao Mo nodded, "Wine is not as good as fellow Taoist and I have never lost you in drinking. Originally I wanted to save face for you in front of your 2 apprentices. This is what fellow Taoist asked for." The old watchman laughed. If it wasn't for the thoughtful hospitality at the entrance of Luopao Mountain, Qin Pingan would have won one of the lotus flower blessed places. "Oh, do you want to be among the middle and upper class blessed places? You can, don't stop you, the new owner, from throwing money. As for the expenses of the god's money, this wealth fan, who likes to be a good fortune boy, will truly understand what it means to have enough money left behind and be a waste of money." In the embarrassing situation of the sound, when he finally managed to improve the rank of the blessed land, and every time he went to his own blessed land, Qin Pingan couldn't help but feel a pain in his flesh. Otherwise, Qin Pingan really thought that he would be reduced to a picture of mountains and rivers with a line drawing. If he really spent a little money, he could really draw gold and paint? As long as you apply a layer with a brush, the blessed land will soon peel off like layers of red paint, and the content of the inscription will soon become unclear. For example, in your hometown of Qinshanzhu, the common people posted the spring festival couplets on the door and wall with rice paste. It is reasonable to say that they are firm and it will not hurt if they are not changed for several years. After that, as stated in the Book of Eccentricities, the mountain is only 1 year old, and the mountain is 1 year old, and the lotus root blessed land only needs 1 year, and the spring festival couplets will fall when the wind blows. After the Jiazi time is over, Qinshanzhu, who realizes it later, will either regard the blessed land that dares to change its name without authorization as a chicken rib, and will not spend money on it, but Qin Pingan and Luopaishan as long as they want to completely fill this hole, no matter what. Compared with the mud-legged boy, you have a few more scare identities and titles. You have to obediently come to worship the mountain with Pindao, and then look at the mood of Pindao at that time, and remember to bring the boy and Xingyi with you. Come together, let the little learn how to speak well, kowtow a few more times and then apologize. In the end, of course, the 2 of you returned without success. Anyway, Qin Pingan likes to protect the calf the most, and you definitely don't want to let the boy and Xingyi kowtow to Pindao to make amends. It was you who asked for forgiveness when you came to the door for something. You couldn't reach an agreement. You were disappointed and went home. Isn't that what you, Qin Pingan, asked for? Talk about money? Back then, the city lord of Baidi City didn't go to the Taoist temple in person, and the price he gave at that time was high enough. Isn't he Jing Juzhong disappointed? So, thankfully at the gate of the mountain, a little girl said a few words of her unintentional words, which happened to be the warm words that made Pindao feel particularly pleasant. It helped Qin Pingan and Luopao Xuanhuan mansion to save at least a few thousand grains of rain money. Not only is it not a loss, but the money earned from the blessed land in the future can be calculated as the money of the gods? Wang Yuanla's eyes widened. Is there such a thing as an apology? If you drink an extra jar of the host's wine, you should help others to reveal it. Today I have learned a lot from Mr. Mo, and I have to digest it well. I guess it will be useful when I go out to the rivers and lakes in the future. I remember that many years ago Taoist's son who pretended to be his ancestor tricked him into drinking, and when he drank too much he began to point out the world. The cave owner is highly respected. He is notoriously big-hearted, has a very wide belly, and has the most demeanor of the seniors on the mountain. Taoist's son is a bird of prey, so just listen to what he said in reverse. The old Guanju said in his heart, "By also accidentally succeeded in the matter of Guandao blessed land sword cultivation." Xiao Mo thought for a while, since it's him I can accept it. Lao Guanju asked, "You just said the candidate in your mind earlier, what did Qin Pingan think?" Xiao Mo told the truth, "Me." Then Chief Zhou. The next two students and disciples are side by side, Chao Qingqing and Guizhujiu. Lao Guanju smiled and said, "As expected." Xiao Mo lifted the mud seal and finally drank 2 jars of long-live wine. His face was flushed, he was burping and stood up drunk. Today he was really full of drinks. He stretched out his hand to support the table. "Let's go." Lao Guanju followed and stood up, his robe fluttered, the smell of alcohol dissipated and said with a smile, "I have nothing to do, it's better to accompany you around the world." Ruthless things. In ancient times the Taoist priests in the world brewed and drank alcohol. The most taboo was to condense wine as spiritual energy, which belonged to no wine at all. Xiao Mo patted the old Guanju on the shoulder. "Fellow Taoist Bixiao, there's something I've wanted to say for a long time. You really can't taste wine." Lao Guanju smiled and said, "It's hard to find drinking friends and Taoist friends. There are so many people outside the table who don't drink toast and drink fine wine. Xiao Mo, don't hold on and vomit." Xiao Mo's throat moved slightly, his stomach was surging, but he still forcibly swallowed a large mouthful of wine. Seeing this scene, Wang Yuanlu shuddered subconsciously. This skinny Taoist understands again, this amiable senior Mo, stubborn good face. Lao Guanju rarely looked sad and said softly, "Xiao Mo, you should have guessed that the earliest opportunity of lotus flower blessed land was a kendo vein that I tailor-made for you. In the early years I wondered if it was a kendo that could help you. 100 feet ahead, but after waiting too long at the Taoist temple in the East China Sea, I had to change this vein." Xiao Mo smiled and nodded, "I guessed it a long time ago. Fellow Taoist has what he wants. As for the outcome of the matter, it's nothing to you and me. Otherwise, you think I'm drinking so much alcohol today, it's really just a matter of fact. Are you greedy for a glass of wine?" Lao Guanju smiled and said, "If you don't have 1 or 2 close friends, the world will be extremely boring." Xiao Mo smiled and said, "Then next time I'll be the host, I'll bring you and my son to drink together." The old watcher turned his head again. Xiao Mo felt helpless. "It is rare that I regret that my swordsmanship level is not high enough, otherwise I will drink according to the head of my fellow Taoist." The old master said with emotion, "Xiao Mo, the person you see now is not the one he once was." Xiao Mo smiled and said, "I know not." In the courtyard, yawning again and again, Guizhujiu asked her master for instructions, and she wandered around alone to see the scenery. Xiego and the sister, Qiu Qin, who had no Taoist name, had a good relationship, so she took the girl and followed him. Leader Guo went for a walk under the moon, but Luo Fume wanted to stay a little longer, but Pei Xiang chased her away with her heartfelt words, so Luo Fume had to get up and follow her junior sister and accompany the sable-cap girl surnamed Xia out of the yard. Full of regrets, she always felt that she didn't have a word with Qin Shanju, not only a little loss but a big loss. Otherwise, she has even prepared a draft of a certain landscape story. The outline of this story is that Luo Fume was young and ignorant, and she had a discussion with a young hidden official on a certain night in a certain year. Qin Shanju said a few words, but the other party was furious and stern. She was reprimanded, but she didn't die, she survived. In this way, within the Fox country, who would dare to betray her in the future? Compared with what realm, it is more than courage and courage. Pei Xiang said with a smile. Shanju, Gao Jun returned to the Hushan school this time, and tried a far-flung tour of Yinshan out of one's body. Compared with the previous one, it was finally a veritable long-distance tour. He traveled all the way to the northern Jin kingdom, the boundary of the suburbs of Beijing. At that time I actually followed her in God not far or near. Xiuqing Jindan Ku Fang is my generation. The first 2 earth immortals in the history of the Blessed Land were both from the Hushan school of the Songlai country. Not only is Gao Jun's own aptitude for Taoism excellent, but it is also a gift from this world, a kind of gift to Eugenie invisibly. From becoming a chi practitioner to forming a golden pill, every step of the mountaineering and every step of the realm is a brand new scenery. So far, the Lotus Root Blessed Land has no specific realm division. Especially the kind of mysterious yin got out of body, even Eugenie became nascent soul realm back then. He was still cautious. This rejuvenated man of Tao, only before ascension, did he teach Gao Jun all the money, and he taught secretly orally, and did not leave any written records in the Hushan school. I guess the reason why Gao Jun didn't dare to try yin gods out of body was because Eugenie, who was the master, had not yet created a body outside the body of the Yang, so he felt that it was not appropriate to take too much risk. Where do you know that the earth immortal Yin Shin is actually very simple in the vast world? It is a very common thing. Where do you need to look at the almanac to choose the auspicious day? And there is no taboo that the Yin Shin is not suitable for the daylight and daytime. Changming said indifferently, "We think it's simple just because we have too much past experience accumulated by the predecessors on the mountain, and their teachers and apprentices find it difficult because everything is made from nothing, and it is all up to you to ponder it bit by bit. The doorway that came out is a real talent and a real learning, and it is a family study and a teacher's biography that came from an immortal mansion and established a school. It is hard to say that if your Fox country does not have Luopao Mountain as a backing, after 300 or 500 years, at the most thousands of years, there is no right to wrestle with the Hushan school. Maybe there are at least 3 or 5 chair owners in the Hushan school Patriarch Hall, except for the leader Gao Jun. If any one of them is taken out alone, the entire Fox kingdom can be destroyed. Sweep away." Pei Xiang suddenly looked ugly. Just because of the other party's patriarch of Luopao Mountain, Pei Xiang couldn't say anything. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Most of what Taoist longevity said is true, but it's also true that you have a backing in the country." Pei Xiang smiled sweetly, changed the subject and said something good. "Xianxia, it is rumored that there are 72 blessed places in the world, of which there are only a handful of blessed places of the highest rank, and not all of them can form a kind of naive Tong Lingzi's Tao prototype. No matter what, we are very lucky in the Lotus Root Blessed Land. The woman who was condensed by the human literary movement before is a sign?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "There are advantages and disadvantages either for Tat, each wearing shoes for the other, or like-minded, to increase and stabilize the fate of heaven and earth together. But in general, even if you take 10,000 steps back and say that the neighbors are not in harmony, the two sides cannot make money from harmony. But in the end, the pros far outweighed the cons." Changming smiled and said, "It must be a good thing. Any small world of blessed land is ultimately limited by the territory of mountains and rivers and the number of living beings, plus it belongs to several different worlds, so even if it is fortunate that the Tao manifests and becomes a spirit, the weather will not be too great. In the center of the courtyard, there is a hanging painting which is a bird's-eye view of the whole picture of Qiushui Lake. The Lady Hu Jun is the beautiful woman with a long armor on her little finger from the beautiful world. Regarding this secret discussion that can determine the direction of a world situation, it is just the choice of the venue for the discussion, and there is an endless debate. It is hoped that it will be held on the top of the mountain, so as to make a golden signboard and to win more cultivators. There is also hope that it is best to choose a location in another dojo, but I am still worried that we can't talk to each other. If we disagree, we will start a fight. Once this kind of fight between gods and gods affects the spiritual energy of the world and the aura of the mountains and rivers in our dojo, it will not be repaired and operated for hundreds of years. I want to restore it." In the end, Qiuchi Lake was chosen. As for the goddess of water goddess who proclaimed herself Hengqiu Lake Lord, what she thought, God knows. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Do you think Wei Liang will come down the mountain to greet him?" Changming also asked, "Will Gao Jun reveal the secret?" Pei Xiang shook his head, "It's hard to guess." Even if she was reluctant and got acquainted with all kinds of people in Luopao Mountain, Pei Xiang had to pinch her nose and admit it, guessing people's hearts, not her strength. Qin Pingan put his fingers together, twisted it gently, and placed the Taoist temple on the island in the middle of the Hengqiu Lake in front of him, and said with a smile, "It seems to be Zhu Lian's handwriting." Pei Xiang covered his mouth and smiled and said, "It was the watcher who carefully screened and collected the words." Qin Pingan tooted, I understand, no wonder, no wonder. Sure enough, it was a love debt owed by your son Zhu Lian back then." Pei Xiang asked carefully, "Is the mountain owner worried that Gao Jun will use this discussion to cause the whole world to be at odds with our Luapa Mountain, or just openly become an enemy of Luapa Mountain?" Qin Pingan smiled and said nothing. Zhang Lu Changming smiled and said, Children play a house except for sand, mud that can be seen everywhere tossing around, playing and slapsticking in addition to chicken feathers, shuttlecocks, bamboo dragonflies, dove carts and paper kite tops, rattles comic strips, wooden swords and bamboo knives etc. These toys, don't you need adults to help you prepare? Pei Xiang smiled awkwardly and was horrified, not knowing how to answer for a while. Just like the previous embarrassment, Pei Xiang felt an almost suffocating sense of oppression at this moment. The last time I had a similar feeling was when Pei Xiang left the Fox Country and participated in the Jianghu Patriarch's Hall for the first time, the moment she crossed the threshold. Across the two chairs, the tall woman who always sees who is smiling all year round, actually gave Pei Xiang the feeling of being pitiful, so she has never been close to this Jisafeng's patriarch. Jixin, every time I meet her in the mountains or in Zhu Lian's yard, Pei Xiang is like. A cold copper coin is picked up by her fingertips in winter as if every time she talks she is holding the copper coin in the palm of her hand. And this copper coin is destined to not be hot. Pei Xiang carefully glanced at the man in the blue shirt beside him from the corner of his eye. The long-lived Taoist friend is not false, but after all Qin Pingan is the master of the sect. But contrary to Paixiang's expectations, he seemed to neither affirm nor deny the claim that Zhongli had a long life. Pei Xiang immediately closed her eyes and let out a sigh in her heart. It wasn't until this moment that she really wanted to understand the truth that Zhu Lian was talking about, as well as some remarks to explain the truth. Up close, the scenery is not spectacular, people and things are mediocre. When the mountain owner was on the mountain, it was easy to say that when the mountain owner went out for a long trip again, all of us, inside and outside the mountains, should not treat the long life of the master as a mountain master. Therefore, in a sense, the existence of longevity does not exist, it only depends on whether the mountain owner is in the mountain or not. But a woman is a woman, and while Paixiang's heart palpitated, he began to ponder a question: this longevity, shouldn't he like Qin Pingan? Never wanted to squint and laugh for a long time, as always with a soft voice, he said to Pei Xiang in his heart alone, do I like Qin Pingan? Does it have anything to do with fellow Taoist Pei Xiang? Pei Xiang, who was guessed in his mind, was so embarrassed that he wanted to dig a hole in the ground. Will he be hated by the other party and account for it? It seems that many people in Luapa Mountain have this tradition. Qin Pingan regained his senses, restrained his thoughts and asked, did you talk to me just now with your heart? It turned out that Qin Pingan's heart lake was rippling with ripples, and there was a ding-dong sound, but it was not a specific voice. It was like a fish walking after the hook. The fishhook is the name, and the one who bites the bait is the monk's language related to it, so Qin Pingan can see the real body of the fish, or a string of words as long as he lifts the fishing rod. Some things are actually different from what you think. Pei Xiang immediately replied with his heart, from this moment on, I haven't heard anything, I don't know anything. Zhang Lu Changming smiled and said, that's good, I swear you don't have to, I can trust you. Pei Xiang felt chills down his spine, he might as well make a poisonous oath, it's really fatal. She made up her mind that she would stay far away from this Zhongli in the future, just begging for someone who didn't feel guilty and wouldn't be afraid of knocking on the door at night. As long as you keep a respectful distance from the patriarch of the law, it is easy to get along. What's more, as long as the mountain owner is not in Luopao Mountain, she will try to stay in the Fox Country. Besides, he is the master of the Fox Country, doesn't he also have a seat in Jianghu Patriarch's Hall? You, the master of the law, can't think of avenging private revenge in public, can you? Qin Pingan stood up, I'm going to find Lu Xianying and Gu Ken, you don't have to follow, and Shego doesn't have to either, at most 1 hour, and he will return to the Fox Country soon. In an instant, the cyan figure transformed into dozens of sword lights condensed like silk threads, rising from the ground, piercing the night sky, and vanishing in an instant. Finally, in the sky, he overlapped with the avatar of the talisman who no longer needed to continue to observe the Tao. He lowered his head and looked at the world. His body tilted a line and fell toward the earth, mountains and rivers. When Qin Pingan settled down, it was the appearance of a man in a green shirt again, appearing in the bustling streets of the capital city, as if entering a realm of no one. There was one more person on the road out of thin air, but pedestrians on the road were unaware. After coming behind the two people with red sleeves in the high-rise buildings all over the street, and the smell of fat powder is stronger than that of wine, Qin Pingan smiled and said, I'm so courageous, I'm just drinking a flower wine. Gu Ken turned to look at Qin Pingan, twitched the corner of his mouth again, and raised his chin towards Lu Xianying beside him. I don't care, someone's 3 legs are cowardly. Seeing Qin Pingan, Lu Xianying's eyes lit up, and he became arrogant in an instant. Afterwards he was held accountable. Gukan guessed that it was not a big deal, but there is not Qin Pingan who is well known in such matters. Lu Xianying reached out first. Raining on Gukan's neck, he grabbed Qin Pingan again and wrapped himself around one of these self-proclaimed daring men, strode forward and laughed. Go drink and drink. Gukan spends money to treat guests and Qin Pingan will accompany you, pity me. Lu, who is in good spirits, is considered to be planted today. He was dragged by two bad friends and threatened me that if I don't drink, I won't be a friend. It's really impossible if I don't go. Gukan, who had to bow his head, looked at Qin Pingan, who was in a normal situation. Qin Pingan winked. What's the hurry? Wait and see. Just him? Even with the courage of the three of them, they dare not go in and drink. Sure enough, they were pulled by the two friends to the door of the restaurant, but Lu Xianying walked slower and slower, stopped, stomped his feet, let go of his hands, turned around and left, looking at the lonely back, which was pitiful. Qin Pingan followed with a smile. Gukan walked like a fly, jumped up with a kick, kicked Lu Xianying's butt and scolded with a smile. You are so cowardly, how dare you pretend to be an uncle with me? Lu Xianying staggered, patted his butt, turned his head and raised his chin to someone with a smile on his arms, but before he could say anything, Qin Pingan nodded vigorously. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, 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 yes. If it wasn't for me, I would have gone in early, looking like I was leaning against the red and cuddled up in the green, sitting in the flowers with uprightness, but in fact it was like sitting on pins and needles. I finally waited for the wine party to disperse, walked out, stood on the street, looked back, take a look, and tell yourself one more sentence. After all, I have been here. Gukan pretended to be surprised and said, I can't, Master Lu can't spend the night? Lu Xianying had already turned around and strode forward, raising his hands and holding up two middle fingers. Qin Pingan held back his laughter and said at the same time as Gukan next to him, I'm looking for a place. I'll pay for it. Lu Xianying turned his head and scolded, Why are you walking so slowly, Qin Menghu, little slug? Why don't you walk on three legs? The three people who were from the same village in the past but of different ages, no matter what kind of people they have become now, whether they are as good as they once thought, after all, they are still as good and sincere friends as they were back then. You're tuning into the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.